voice. It's like you could read a narration or something.
Thank you.
Has anyone ever told you that?
Not yet. But, us Brewers fans get a lot of, reports and, tall tales of us being, belligerent. And, there's a pretty high, a lot of crazies out there. So
a lot of drinkers out there.
You're not crazy.
I appreciate that. We got to rewrite the narrative. And I
Yeah.
appreciate you, Nick, calling that out. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
So, absolutely, just rewriting the narrative one-on-one at a time. So, here we are in the belly of the beast.
I have had the honor of one time when I was in the Ram van. I'll just briefly mention this. Someone, because I was talking to the driver and being very friendly. I'm from Long Island. I'm from New York. I've lived in New York my whole life. And this guy was, the driver was saying after we finished our conversation, I was just about to get out. He was like, I thought you were from the Midwest when you first started talking because you were so friendly and open, and most people in New York are like, they won't even look your way.
To the point.
So maybe I could fit in to your kind of happy camper attitude over there in the cheese state. But so much to talk about today. Mets, Yankees. Who would have thought with the Mets? I mean, Nick, you've beat reported all season long. I had the privilege to beat report a couple of times. Also went to a Mets game to beat report with you.
Yes.
I think that was July 12th.
Mets Rockies.
Yes, Mets Rockies. And that was a good game to beat report for. So, the question is, where do the Mets and also the Yankees go from here in terms of the LCS? How do they respond to these challenges? I'll say, not to sound biased, but the Yankees were oftentimes, I would say, maybe up and down throughout this season. But in the playoffs, in the postseason, I don't know if they've been playing their best baseball. So we'll see if they can maximize their potential, whether it's against Detroit or it's against Cleveland, which that game, Detroit or Cleveland, Game 5 will be played at 1 today, so we can check in for some updates. And, I think the Mets, on the other hand, they've also had an up and down season, but I think they're playing their absolute best possible baseball they could have. Even if in the beginning of Game 5 against the Phillies, they were leaving men stranded and, not quite taking advantage until Lindor.
Yeah.
But I think the best may be yet to come for the Mets, for the Yankees as well. So it's a great time to be a baseball fan in New York with just all the fanatic fans out there, and you talk about Grimace and the whole saga of that. So it's just I'm so excited to get into this. This is probably it's like Lou, when he was setting this up, this is the perfect time for a one-on-one show.
I mean, compared to last year when neither the Mets or the Yankees made the playoffs, it was not nearly as fun to have these shows and have stuff to talk about. But for the Mets, they've got through the 3 seed in the Brewers. They've got through the 2 seed in the Phillies. Now it's time to take on the 1 seed in the National League in the Dodgers. They're going to have Kodai Senga on the hill in Game 1. Just announced Sean Manaea will go in Game 2. I think both the Mets and the Yankees need to focus on their respective LCSs before thinking about a potential Subway Series World Series. But it's tangible now. You can almost reach out and touch it, a potential Mets-Yankees World Series, and that's incredibly exciting.
Oh, gosh, yeah. I mean, where do I even start? Talk about the excitement. On one hand, you have the Mets, certainly, like both of you said, playing their best ball. Alonso, taking it to the plate without a shadow of a doubt every single play. Same with Vientos, an absolute increase on on-base percentage. It's been sort of an all-across-the-board improvement on the Mets front. And same goes for the Yankees. But, like you had mentioned, it's a little bit too soon to call in terms of the Subway Series, so it'll be very interesting to see how they play out in their upcoming Central Series.
Interesting, to say the least. And before we wrap this thing up and send it to break and get back talking about MLB postseason, just to our YouTube listeners and viewers, we had some technical issues getting the stream up, but it is up now, according to our producers in the back, so we apologize for those technical difficulties, but we'll be right back talking a general overview of the MLB postseason so far. It's a review of that Dodgers-Padres series, Tigers-Guardians series. Game 5 is going to be played at 1 p.m. You're listening to One-on-One on WFUV Sports. We'll be right back.
Hey guys, Grace McCarran here with Jack Warner.
And we're two of your hosts for Nosebleeds, WFUV's one and only baseball podcast.
We'll keep you in the loop on all tri-state news with the Yankees and Mets,
as well as the biggest headlines from around the MLB.
Catch weekly episodes of Nosebleeds on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Take a trip around the bases with Nosebleeds on WFUV Sports.
Welcome back to One-on-One on WFUV Sports, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. I'm Ben Oppenheimer, Nick Guzman, as well as Frank Spicuzza on the show with me today, and we're just going to get right into some postseason review of what we've seen in the MLB so far this month of October. First thing I want to get into is the Dodgers-Padres series, and the Dodgers came in, coming into the season, getting Ohtani and having this great mass of wealth and stars, and they had the hype. But what I thought was a really good headline in an ESPN article that I was reading about a wrap-up of the series is the Dodgers had everything on paper, but what they needed was an edge in those clutch situations. And they certainly found it late in that Padres series. And I want to throw it to you, Nick. Just what did you see from these Dodgers where, they you could say they surprised expectations, because some people thought the Padres were going to win this series after being up earlier in the series. Now it went the other way. What did you see from L.A.?
Well, especially with all the drama that occurred early in the series, I think a lot of the narrative was that the Dodgers were soft after the whole Manny Machado incident, the whole incident, the fans throwing stuff at Jerks and Profar and the other Padres players in Game 2 in L.A. And then the Padres won Game 3 and took a 2-1 lead, and it seemed like all the momentum was and the narrative was with the Padres. But give credit to the Dodgers and especially their pitching staff completely shutting down this Padres offense, which was lighting it up in Game 2 and Game 3 in those wins, but 24 consecutive scoreless innings to close out this series, dating back to Game 3 for the Padres. Dodgers bullpen didn't allow an earned run in the final 3 games of the series. That's 17 innings. So it came down to the Dodgers pitching, and Yamamoto, who got blown up in Game 1, a major reason why I think a lot of people were saying that he was tipping his pitches, possibly in Game 1, and that gave the Padres an edge on that. But for him to bounce back in Game 5 to get the start and give you 5 scoreless innings is about all you can ask for. It's hard to look at these Dodgers and how much money they've spent and the payroll and all the names and all the players and think of them as like resilient, because they have everything pretty much given to them in terms of payroll and in terms of talent. But I think when you look at what's happened to them this season, whether it's being down 2-1 against the Padres, backs against the wall, a really good Padres team that I think a lot of people picked to beat the Dodgers and maybe picked to go to the World Series too, just based on how hot they've been since June. But for them to come back in this series, it does show a level of resilience, especially when you consider just how beaten up their starting pitching staff is. I mean, the names that they have on the shelf, from Glasnow to Gavin Stone, I mean, so many of their Clayton Kershaw, so many of their best starting pitchers are injured. James Paxton. And they really had to piece it together. There was a bullpen game in there in Game 4, just 9 scoreless innings from your bullpen in a bullpen game, in a do-or-die Game 4 from the Dodgers. That says something about this bullpen and this pitching staff and the level of resilience to get through these injuries when you really only have 2 or 3 usable starting pitchers at this point in the postseason to be able to get through a 5-game series, it is impressive.
Oh, yeah. Well, Nick, you talk a lot about resiliency, and I mean, I think MLB fans from coast to coast are, not swayed or, caught oblivious for this, battle over SoCal. I mean, Dodgers and Padres have been at it for years now, especially in 2022 when the Padres pulled off the upset. But, I mean, don't take it from me, take it from Mookie Betts himself. Quote from just a few days ago, "We knew they'd be gunning from us, especially after last year, but we came out with the right energy." So, and like you had said, with Ohtani being out for Game 4, they were down a starting pitcher. So to take, a key component away from their defense, being the Dodgers, yet to still be resilient enough to pull off the win against enormous hitters like Soto and Tatis, it's, undoubtedly a great look for the rest of their postseason.
Yeah, I mean, I think this series win almost shows that a lot of times the experts in any sport, but in baseball, the predictors and the analysts, sometimes they just get it, or a lot of times really, they get it completely wrong. And we had a lot of people, spectators, people within the league saying, oh, this is the Padres series to lose. And the Dodgers just, they looked down and they said, we're going to get through this. We're going to grind. And they did. And what I also think is important in situations like being behind in the series is just blocking out the noise. And that's what I think guys like Muncy did in terms of their attitude in the clubhouse from what I've been reading is they said, oh, we're not paying attention to the experts. 80% of the experts are saying we're going to lose, but that doesn't matter. We're not thinking about them. And I think that defiance, sometimes when you're talking about mental, how does mentality affect on the field play? That defiance gives you more of an edge, the edge that when I first introduced this segment, that the Dodgers ultimately had, even though they were more injured and arguably less complete than the Padres. And now they're going to go to New York. Well, not first, but they'll first play 2 games in L.A., but they're going to head to New York and see what they can do against the Mets. And it's definitely going to be a big challenge for the Mets against this Dodgers team. Either team would have been a challenge.
Yeah, and this series really, I think it goes to show that you're one cold stretch from your offense away from getting bounced out of the playoffs. I mean, we saw it with the Phillies, couldn't really get their bats going at all, except for maybe in Game 2 against the Mets, and they get upset and they go home as the higher seed. And the Padres, just 3 games where you can't afford to go scoreless, and they did. So you're really one bad stretch offensively away from getting bounced from these playoffs. But to your point, Ben, I don't think either one of these matchups would be easy for the Mets. Like, that's why I was very hesitant to yesterday to pick someone and be like, I'd rather face the Padres or I'd rather face the Dodgers from a Mets perspective. I think there's definitely pros and cons to both. You could say that the Padres were the hotter team, but then they went cold and their offense completely disappeared. You could also say that you'd want to face the Dodgers because of their lack of starting pitching and inability to put 4 usable starters out there. But then their bullpen went out and pitched 9 scoreless innings against the Padres in Game 4. So it is really a pick your poison type of situation. But I think for the Padres, it has to be really disappointing when you think about just how good they've been since June and July.
Yeah.
And really one of the best teams in baseball, if not the best team since then, to win 93 games. And there was a time when, they were getting close to the Dodgers potentially for that NL West title. Of course, the Dodgers eventually pull away and finished with 98 wins. But it was a really, really solid season from the Padres. They beefed up their bullpen so much at the trade deadline, with guys like Tanner Scott and Jason Adam, and also with Robert Suarez as their closer. It seemed like they were set up for a big run, but, it's playoff baseball, and you ran into a team that was supposed to win it all at the beginning of this season. Maybe things didn't go quite as smoothly as they were supposed to in the regular season. You can blame injuries for that. You can blame whatever, but the Dodgers, no matter how they got here, what they were backs against the wall in the NLDS. They're in the NLCS now. And although we're looking at it from Mets perspective, from a Dodger perspective, yes, the Mets are hot, but you're playing the 6th seed. You have to love your chances to, win 2 games out in LA and go back to New York with a chance to maybe you steal 1, and that's all you need to get yourself over the line back to LA with a chance to clinch maybe in a potential Game 6. And it's going to be tough, this Dodgers-Mets series, and I, as a Mets fan, am very nervous for it. But I think the Dodgers, there's definitely holes in this team, and they were exposed early on in this series against the Padres. But, Mookie Betts getting back hot is huge for them. I think Ohtani hasn't maybe been quite as present offensively as you would think, considering, the season that he had, the MVP season that he had.
Yeah.
But same thing with Aaron Judge. It's the kind of thing that can change at literally any moment. You miss with one fastball in the zone, and that thing's getting clocked 450 feet, and you're down 3-0. So there's so much talent in this Dodgers team, no matter what the injuries are. It's definitely shaping up to be a really, really interesting series against the Mets.
Just to slide in, if I may.
Go for it.
The other thing I've been talking about it throughout the week with, especially Nick Palmer being a Dodgers fan. One of the things I talked about that while I have been heavily critical of the team at times for, sometimes in my opinion being a bit overrated, and, they were easy to hate once they had the offseason that they did because that no one, everyone thought it was a super team. But the one thing that I will say is that it really is a testament to how stacked your roster is when Teoscar Hernandez is underrated. That guy on any other ball club where your 1 through 3 is not Betts, Ohtani, Freeman, that guy's a star on any other team. His last night comes in clutch with a home run, after Kike's. Good night last night to be named Hernandez. But it's just it's crazy to me that even the Dodgers role players, and Nick makes a great point that, health really, I think, is the only thing that held them back this year. I think they would have been unequivocally, the favorite the entire season if the team stays healthy. But guess what? No team stays healthy. That's how professional sports work. So you have to kind of adjust to those kind of things. But it really is crazy that once you get past the bona fide stars of the Dodgers, even their what do you want to call them, role player guys, would be stars on other teams that are not the Dodgers.
And a guy like Kike Hernandez, who for some reason just rakes in the postseason.
Yep.
And doesn't really matter what team it's for. I mean, you saw this in 2021, Jack, on the Red Sox.
One of the craziest runs I've ever seen.
And he did it before that when he was with LA too, and then coming back now after that stint with Boston and being still just a weapon in the postseason despite a very average regular season offensively. The Dodgers always seem to have guys like that, whether it's Kike Hernandez or Max Muncy or Gavin Lux. There's so many guys that can step up beyond Ohtani and Freeman and Betts and Teoscar Hernandez. It's such a deep lineup, and I think it's going to be tough for this Mets pitching staff, but the Mets starters have proven people wrong all season long, and it'll be very interesting to see whether or not they can do it again.
Well, I also want to note, and I mentioned this earlier before the show, is that the Dodgers are similar to your Brewers, Frank, in that they don't chase balls out of the strike zone that much, and that's going to be difficult for the Mets pitching staff to get through that lineup. That definitely has a good eye and good judgment. So it's going to be a challenge. It was going to be a challenge either way. And I also just want to mention, I love the divisional rivalries that we're seeing in the NLDS. Basically in the NLDS is you saw Dodgers, Padres, and you saw Mets, Phillies, two bitter divisional
don't
rivals.
like each other.
Yeah, and I think that just makes it so much better.
Definitely. Ben, I'm curious what you made of the whole Manny Machado thing that happened in Game 2, the throwing the ball against the Dodgers dugout. My take on it, I think a lot of people thought that was kind of going to spark the Padres because the Dodgers were kind of viewed as soft in that interaction. Manny Machado knew what he was doing throwing the ball against the dugout. He threw it just hard enough to get them mad, but soft enough that it seems like the Dodgers are soft. That's my he knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah. Well, I think it obviously backfired.
I think it did backfire.
I
think it brought the Dodgers closer together.
Yeah, and it jinxed the Padres, and in situations like that, in terms of having those moments of emotion or kind of acting, I guess you could say that was unprofessional, right? It's not. It wouldn't be wrong to describe it as unprofessional. I think that, as you noted, that gives the other team the chip on their shoulder, the edge, in that they just tried to do this to us. They just tried to disrespect us. And with the Padres, when you're the bully, and I think the Padres were the bully in that situation, you're already feeling high, riding high on top. You don't need to shove it in the other team's face that you're doing so well. And guess what? Too much of a good thing is not a good thing. So I think that really that might have sparked the Dodgers in terms of their serious comeback is the intense dislike for the opposing team, particularly inflamed by what Machado did. And also, if Machado's on the Mets, which almost could have happened 5 years ago, if he was on the Mets and he did that to the Phillies, I'd be scared, because I would be thinking
It's the kind of thing that wakes him up.
Yes, exactly. So it's not what I would have done, but I'm not Manny Machado. But just moving over here to, before we get into a deeper dive into postseason baseball in New York in the next segment, I want to talk about the Tigers-Guardians series, maybe slightly less visible in the national spotlight just because of the other series that have been going on. But I do want to mention it because the Tigers were one of the hottest teams in the MLB, in the American League, up until the postseason. They've treaded water, I would say, in the postseason, and the Guardians are just refusing to go away. But they're still under pressure. Both teams under pressure. I want to get both of your takes on where you see this series going today and who's going to close it out. Game 5 at 1 p.m. What do you guys think?
Well, I don't understand how the Tigers, talent-wise, are doing this. Like, when you look up and down their lineup and you see, like, a whole bunch of, like, 650 OPSs mixed in with, like, Kerry Carpenter and, like, Matt Vierling's in the 700s, too, Parker Meadows. But, like, it's hard to believe that they've gotten this far. But they have. And they're in a winner-take-all Game 5 against Cleveland. Their bullpen has been pretty stellar in this postseason. They shut out Cleveland in back-to-back games in this series, in Games 2 and Game 3. But Cleveland, backs against the wall in Game 4, come through and win that game to force the Game 5. And now for Detroit, you're in a situation where you have your ace, Tariq Skubal, maybe the best pitcher in baseball, the AL Cy Young without a doubt, someone who's proven himself in this stretch run. He's given strong start after strong start in the series against the Astros, and then here against Cleveland. He'll pitch in Game 5, and I think you would have liked to have closed it out at home if you're Detroit, but you have your ace going, and it's the kind of run it's comparable maybe a little bit to the Mets run, but I'd say a little more Cinderella, just based on, the Mets got themselves back into this thing in like late June, early July. Yeah. They were back in a wild card spot, and then it kind of ebbed and flowed since then. In late August, I referenced that Orioles series where they were 2 games out at that point, but it was up and down, but still the Mets were back in the mix by July. The Tigers were on no one's radar until like mid-September. Yeah. And they just kept winning down the stretch to win 86 games. I mean, they sold at the trade deadline. Yeah. I mean, they literally let guys go like Mark Canha and Gio Urshela. He was DFA'd and finished the season with the Braves.
Yeah.
And Flaherty.
They did not expect to be in this situation. So they're playing with house money right now. You got Tariq Skubal on the mound. The game was pushed up. It was supposed to be a night game tonight. Now it's going to be at 1 o'clock because of some inclement weather in Cleveland. But I really don't know who to pick in this game because the Tigers really seem to have some kind of magic. But Cleveland, you talk about their bullpen, it's supposed to be lights out. Clase has been a little bit shaky in these playoffs. Gave up that bomb to Kerry Carpenter and then also gave up a run in Game 4 as well. But if you're Cleveland, you feel like you've worked all year to get to this point. You're facing an upstart Tigers team who really have self-belief in themselves, and a manager in A.J. Hinch who's one of the best in baseball, despite the sign stealing scandal that he was involved with the Astros. I think he's proven with this run that he's still one of the best managers in baseball. It's going to be a really, really interesting matchup to watch, and I think it really comes down to how well Skubal can pitch. If Skubal goes 7-8 scoreless, and they're going to push him to his absolute brink in this game because it's, win or go home. He's going to be at 110, 115 pitches if he has to. If he can get through 7-8 innings, holding Cleveland to one run, maybe even no runs, you got to love the Tigers' chances to win this game.
No, without a doubt. I mean, like you had said, Nick, Skubal has been, schooling, quite frankly, pretty much any team in their path, but especially the Guardians, holding them to a below 250 batting average. And, while certainly both teams have, plenty of firepower on the offense, I think it is going to come down to a matter of what is happening inside of that bullpen. Shane Bieber off of Cleveland pitched his first double-digit strikeout total in a year to date, as a matter of fact. So my personal take is that he's simply getting ready to heat up. The preliminary games in the series have been simply getting the rust off. He's been acclimating to this now quickly ramping up in terms of pressure, this quickly ramping up postseason. So he is certainly acclimating well and giving it all he has. And like you had said, Nick, he will be run ragged. They will pedal him to the metal for as many innings as they can get out of him. So I am going to have to give it to the Guardians for today, but without a doubt, the bullpen off both sides will be giving it all they have.
And another interesting storyline is you got Matthew Boyd going for Cleveland, former Tiger, spent multiple years as a starting pitcher in the Tigers rotation. Now has a chance to knock them out in the playoffs. Made only 8 starts this year, but good with that 2.72 ERA. So I think obviously you take Detroit in terms of the starting pitching edge, but you feel like if Boyd can compete with Skubal, which is a very hard thing to do, and it might be the situation where Cleveland and those hitters, whether it's Quan or David Fry or Jose Ramirez, are just trying to run up Skubal's pitch count as much as they can, or are they going to try to be aggressive and hop on maybe a first pitch fastball? It really depends on what approach you want to take. I think I'd lean towards maybe the being aggressive approach and trying to maybe get him to sneak in a first pitch strike, and you can hop on a pitch and maybe drive it out of the park. But I'm anticipating a low-scoring game. I don't know about you, Ben, but I think I'm seeing like a 3-2 maybe.
I agree with both of your assessments. I think it is going to be a low-scoring game. I do think it's going to be Detroit coming out on top, though, because I think the Cleveland's backs are against the wall, and I think a narrative that was not touched on yet is when you look at the players that have a lot of pressure on them to perform for the Guardians, I think of Andres Gimenez. When you think of Gimenez, you typically wouldn't expect a light-hitting second baseman to bear that much of a load in the playoff series, but he is, and this almost has a tie to the Mets. It does have a tie to the Mets.
Right.
Former
Gimenez was the primary piece that the Guardians received in return from the Mets in the Lindor trade. Right now against the Tigers, he has just 1 hit in 15 plate appearances. He's also struck out 6 times in this series. He's known mostly for his glove, but when you think of his performance in these playoffs, you have to wonder if the Guardians front office is saying, did we make the right choice here? And that's based on his performance, on what we're seeing.
You mean in terms of like trading for him?
Yeah.
And well, yeah. I mean, I don't think they could have afforded to keep Lindor anyway, but
still, as a player they picked up, even getting Lindor out of the equation, the fact that is this a guy we want as our second baseman? I think that's that there's a point to be had for that. Also, I just want to mention Ramirez. He's more important. Is he had a huge home run in the 5th inning of Game 4, but again, like his infield teammate Gimenez, he has not really been good at the plate in this series. Is 2 for 14, and he's a 6-time All-Star with a lot of playoff experience. So I think if the Guardians lose Game 5, which I think they will, it's going to be mostly on Ramirez, but also the question marks and the uncertainty is going to go to Gimenez as well.
Well, it's going to be which version of Cleveland's offense shows up. Is it the Game 1 and Game 4 version where they scored 7 runs and then 5 runs and were able to win, or is it the Games 2 and 3 version where they got shut out 3-0 in back-to-back games? I think the way Cleveland's offense is constructed, like Gimenez had a superb offensive season 2 years ago, where I think people were thinking, did they win the Lindor trade maybe? But then last year he regressed a lot offensively, and this year that's continued. But I think it's up to Jose Ramirez as a guy who's the star on this team, one of the most underrated players in baseball just because he plays in Cleveland and you don't hear a ton about him. But it's up to him, it's up to Stephen Kwan, it's up to David Fry to try to get to Tariq Skubal. As a lefty, it's so hard if you're a left-handed batter to face Skubal. But for Cleveland, I mean, your path to a World Series is first of all through this Detroit Tigers team. And the Yankees are a very good team, but I think both these teams might be looking at that and saying they look human. They don't look like a super team who's blowing everybody away. So if you can just get through this Game 5, the conversation becomes like, why not us this year?
Oh, sure. I mean, the thing about it is that I think, either team is going to have to pick, which side of the ball to play, whether it's going to be defensive or offensive. I don't think that, either side is, capable of performing, both right now. I think that's more of a higher tier, a higher caliber team that's, able to pull that sort of thing off. But, for the most part, I do think that the Guardians 2024, just general offense this season has really been showing out and is going to make the difference in Game 5 here tonight. Without a doubt, I mean, players like Ramirez, like you had mentioned, but also Straw and Kwan have been, stealing bases left and right, absolutely on a tear from off the plate and while on base. So I think if they are able to, they being the Guardians, if they're able to capitalize on these season-wide, not just the postseason, but these season-spanning traits and habits of offensive prowess, they will certainly be able to prevail against the Tigers this evening.
And the last thing I'll say is it's this game. The fact that this Game 5 is happening is a win for the Yankees because it means Skubal has to pitch in this Game 5, and that knocks him out for an extra game in a potential ALCS between the Yankees and the Tigers. So he could have been lined up to pitch 3 games. Now it'll be just 2. So just the fact that this game is happening, maybe both teams burn their bullpens a little bit. A positive for the Yankees, no matter who wins.
I think the type of baseball that the Tigers have been playing for the last couple months makes this Game 5 a little bit easier for them than the Guardians is, because I think, I watched the night that the Tigers clinched a playoff spot. It was when they it's actually funny. The Tigers clinched a playoff spot and the White Sox set the single season loss record on
Double
the same
whammy.
night. They beat the White Sox to clinch their playoff spot. But I remember one of the announcers talking about how the Tigers, all they did to make the playoffs was they played perfect baseball. And what he meant by that was not that they were lighting up the score sheet every time. It was that when they got stellar performances from their pitching, they got even if it was the bare minimum, they got the run support when they needed it. They got the clutch hits when they needed it. They didn't really beat down teams throughout the year. But they found a way to go 30-11 to close the regular season. And that's because they just play, as this announcer put, I forget who it was, he said they play perfect baseball. They are the type of team that is going to make every base knock matter, make every runner in scoring position matter, make every play in the field matter. They're not a team that's going to beat you down. I didn't expect at any point that, and if they make the ALCS, I don't think there will ever be a game. They can make it to the World Series. I don't think there'll ever be a game where they blow any team out. That's not the kind of baseball they play. What's made the Tigers so effective this year is that I think they just have more of a focus on scoring one more run than the other team. Like, I really do. I think there's some teams in this pool that are trying too hard, and you're seeing, offensive disappearances because of it. I think the Tigers have always had just such a more simplistic way that they play baseball that I think really cuts their work out for them a lot more than it does other teams.
Well, they don't have any stars, so
Exactly,
it's like you don't have to
exactly.
worry about any egos if nobody on your team is famous enough to have an ego.
I don't think
It's
that
honestly a good thing.
I don't think they had I believe I was talking to Lou about it at some point. I forget what the exact stat was, but I want to say it was when the season ended, they didn't have a hitter above an 800 OPS. Or they had one hitter above
I
an
think it's
800
Kerry
OPS.
Carpenter is the only one.
Yeah,
but Kerry Carpenter only faces righties.
Right, and
So
that's what it
yeah.
was. Yeah, they had one hitter above an 800 OPS. Like, that's league average. That's insane.
Yeah, and the fact I just can't believe that I thought the Tigers were it was like a fun thing we were doing in like September, like in late September, which was like a fun thing to talk about, but they're here. And they're one win away from the ALCS, and it's really just been an incredible run.
And it's amazing to see what it's done for the city too. I used to live out there, and when I lived there, it was during the Jim Leland managed
The Miguel
regular,
Cabrera,
Miggy Triple Crown era, and it was 2012 sweeping the Yankees in the CS, but then getting swept in the World Series. Then it was 2013. They get knocked out of the ALCS by the Red Sox. Red Sox go on to win the World Series. 2014, they get knocked out in the DS by the Orioles. But they were repeat offenders in the playoffs. Those were teams that were privy to postseason runs, and then just a horrible end of the 2010s. It felt like you almost forgot about a great American sports city's historic baseball team. It's really special, I think, to the city to see how they've rallied around. See Comerica sold out again. I've had so much fun watching them.
Well, we'll see if they live up to the challenge tonight. Some excellent discussion, dialogue, back and forth here. But when we come back, we're going to talk Mets and Yankees, specifically postseason baseball dedicated to New York. You've been listening to One on One on WFUV Sports. We'll be right back.
I'm Will Talent, one of WFUV's New York Yankees beat reporters, eyeing a trip back to the Fall Classic behind the feared 1-2 punch of Aaron Judge and Juan Soto. WFUV Sports has you covered on all things Yankees. Follow me on X at talent_Will to catch live updates, analysis, and so much more from Yankee Stadium. WFUV, your home for New York sports.
Welcome back to One on One on WFUV Sports. I'm Ben Oppenheimer, alongside here with Nick Guzman and Frank Spicuzza. Now we get into arguably my most anticipated moment of today's show. Mets-Yankees talk, postseason baseball for both teams. Both teams now in the LCS. We haven't seen something like this since the year 2000, the year before I was born, before any of us were born. And the city is electric. The city has never been more focused on baseball in over a decade, I think, right now. The spotlight is definitely on baseball. That's great for the sport. It's great for fans in the city. And the Mets and Yankees have actually made the postseason together very recently in 2022.
Yes,
but
didn't end well for the Mets.
It did not end
or
well,
the Yankees.
or the Yankees. But the Mets, for me, I almost don't count it because it was a wild card series. It was a very disappointing 3-game series versus San Diego Padres, and then the Yankees, they got bounced later as well. But this time it feels a lot more substantial. And how about these miracle Mets? I mean, we're gonna interview a guy later who's from the '69 Miracle Mets. But these Mets, we've seen a lot of miracles. For me, watching that doubleheader Braves game, that was a highlight of the season, absolutely the best game of the regular season for the Mets. And then heading into the wild card, Game 1 went very well against the Brewers. Game 2, they let it get away. Game 3, I was like, it's over. We're done. You know, we are finished. It's we come back next year, and then much to Surfer guys detest, we had Pete Alonso hit a home run that was arguably, not even arguably, the most important, the most substantial of his career.
Definitely.
It's funny because sometimes when I'm watching Mets games with my parents, and I was watching with my parents, I was home back in Long Island that weekend, and a lot of times my dad, when the Mets are kind of fading away in an important game, he'll just go downstairs and he'll play guitar and he'll just distract himself from the misery. And my dad did that. He went downstairs to play guitar, but my mom and I, got to be grammatically correct there. We stayed in the living room watching the game, thinking there's still hope is still alive here, and alive it was after that home run. I remember watching it. I stood up and just yelled. Me and my mom just stood up and yelled, and to me, that's when I really understood, particularly in the postseason, that this team does not quit. The lineup is deep. Any person can do damage to the pitching at any time. It's next player up. Nick, you've been a beat reporter all season.
Yes.
What have you seen in this run?
Well, I was at both Game 3 and Game 4. Never seen Citi Field like that. Electric atmosphere. It was so exciting to be there. I mean, it was me on Tuesday for Game 3. It was me, Jack, and Evan Harkin all there together, but we only had one seat in the press box. So two of us kind of had to wander in front of the press box, but you were outside, so you were in the crowd, and it was so fun to just be, in the crowd and feel the energy after every big hit, after Alonso's home run, after Winker's home run. Just the Mets Nation is behind this team right now. It's so exciting to watch. But what's been different about this run is that these Mets seem to get every single big hit that they require. No matter what the situation is, no matter, who's up at the plate, if the Mets need a big hit, they seem to get it. I mean, think about how many walk-off homers they had this year in the regular season to start off, with this point. You got Vientos with a walk-off homer earlier in the season. Then he had another one later. Then you had Alvarez and Winker, the walk-off homers against Baltimore. So the seeds had been laid that this team is clutch. And then there's Lindor's home run against Atlanta to get them into the playoffs. Then Pete Alonso's 3-run homer in Game 3 of the wild card to get them into the DS. And then in the NLDS Game 1, it's in the 8th inning. Mark Vientos, Brandon Nimmo, J.D. Martinez all getting clutch hits late in the game in the 8th inning. In Game 2, it's Mark Vientos tying the game up in the 9th inning with a 2-run homer when it seemed like the Mets were dead. Yes, they eventually lost that game, but it's a moot point considering they won the series. And then Games 3 and 4, in Game 4, you get the grand slam from Francisco Lindor, which such
saved them.
An electric moment. You think about, they loaded the bases in the first inning, in the second inning. They had base runners in almost every inning, and Ranger Suarez was just getting out of trouble in every which way. And then they got to the Phillies bullpen, which really sold the bag for them in this series. Phillies bullpen, which they tried to beef up at the trade deadline with guys like Estevez, really did not perform in this series at all after being a strength for the team all series long. But in that 6th inning, Jeff Hoffman gets into trouble. Bases are loaded. Then Alvarez hits into the fielder's choice to get the force at home, and you're thinking, oh, God, not again. You feel like they had to score there if they were going to win that game. And Lindor puts one big swing and a drive into right center field, and the Mets win the game, and they win the series. So this level of clutchness that we're experiencing, if that's a word, from this lineup is unprecedented in my lifetime looking at the New York Mets.
2015?
2015, they were not down and out as often as they were.
That's true. That's correct.
As it was during this run.
Yeah.
2015 was awesome and really fun, but there was not nearly as many jumping out of your seat, clutch home runs, game on the line to save their season
Yeah.
as there have been in this run right now. So I think just the level of clutch that this lineup has continued to be down this stretch is really awesome to watch. I think another reason why the Mets are in this position is their starting pitching has been spectacular in this postseason. Whether it's Sean Manaea, whether it's Jose Quintana, whoever it is, these Mets have starting pitchers, even Severino, who's gotten hit around a little bit, but his game 2 start was really good until it got to that sixth inning where Harper and Castellanos took him deep. But starting pitching, they've gone deep into games, which is not at all what many teams do in the playoffs. Most managers have very quick hooks for their starting pitchers. You think about just watching like the Cleveland or the Detroit series, anybody other than Skubal, it seems like guys are getting pulled after 4 1/3 innings pitched, maybe after 3 innings, just to get to your strength, to get to the bullpen. The Mets have recognized that their strength is in their starting pitching, and they're riding them. Like, think about Sean Manaea you're thinking about maybe taking him out if he doesn't get Bryce Harper out in that 6th inning with 2 runners on. He strikes him out. He gets through the 6th, goes back out, pitches the 7th, then goes out and tries to pitch into the 8th, and then was pulled after 7+. But the Mets just keep with starting pitching. It puts the pressure on other teams when you have lengthy starts in the postseason. And then it's a guy like David Peterson, who was the Mets' best starter ERA-wise in the regular season. And then for him to be willing to take a bullpen role and just being the jack-of-all-trades guy, having that extra lefty arm in the bullpen, because it is a problem with the Mets. You're going to go face the Dodgers, and you only have Danny Young really as your lefty bullpen arm. And to face Shohei Ohtani and Freddie Freeman, David Peterson's going to be huge in this series. But it's a combination for the Mets of clutch hitting, great starting pitching, and this kind of weird magic and aura that surrounds this team right now, where it seems like no matter how far they're behind, no matter how late in the game they're behind, they're going to find a way to come back and win. And it's just been really special to watch.
On the topic of David Peterson, for the listeners at home, this is your very own Nick Guzman talking to Carlos Mendoza after the game, talking about David Peterson right after the Mets clinched the NLDS.
What can you say about David Peterson and what he's been able to do for you guys out of the bullpen?
Yeah, another guy. Like I could sit here and start talking about pretty much 26, 28 guys that I got on that roster. And Peterson, not only as a starter, he became, a pretty solid starting pitcher for us for the last 3 months. And then once we clinched, he got the save in Milwaukee, and then coming out of the bullpen and getting huge help for us. Today was a perfect example of it. Not easy to go through that lineup the way he did and handed the ball to Diaz, and here we are celebrating. So I'm proud of him because he had to work really hard after the injury and getting surgery, and we didn't know. He didn't know. And put himself in a really good position moving forward, and he's a big piece of what we're doing here.
I think that's what they call sports journalism, everybody.
In the flesh.
Nick Guzman, everyone.
But Mendoza brings up a great point in that, being proud of where David Peterson is at this point, because, last year he had an ERA over 5, and he's been up and down really his whole Mets career and never really has seemed to have a spot in this rotation. For him to have such a good season now he's as big a weapon as they have out of that bullpen. It's been cool to see what Peterson's done, but for the Mets, just their run continues.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned aura. I know it's an overused term nowadays, but as a fan, and obviously this is going to be biased, but it just feels like destiny is with the Mets right now. With the epic way these games are finishing, you're not seeing that as much up in the Bronx on the other side of town with the Yankees. I think, and this is just my opinion, the Yankees games that we've been seeing in the postseason have been, mostly for the most part, I think they haven't been.
They're not as fun.
They're just not as fun. They don't have the aura. They're not New York's team. And right now, to me, it seems like moments like these are showing with the fans, with the excitement, with the finishes, with the way the fans are on the subway with Grimace partying, before games, you saw that video that our very own Dan Bartels posted where he was on the subway and Grimace just comes storming in. Just you think about that. The aura is with the Mets. I don't think it's with the Yankees, and it's just showing to me that New York is a Mets town. It's about 50-50. But I think the Mets have the edge right now. I'm not trolling. I'm being serious.
To counter you, I'm as big a Mets guy as they come. I think the defense to what you just said is that a win's a win. And both teams are in the LCS,
but
no matter how fun the Mets wins were compared to the Yankees. And they were more fun.
We win more spectacularly. We have Howie Rose screaming at the top of his lungs at the end of every game. Then on the Yankees side, you have Sleepy Bob Costas saying, and now they're going to the LCS. Not to disrespect Bob Costas because he's an excellent broadcaster, but I think he's past his heyday. And he sounds like he's reading a book when he's broadcasting. But look, that's what I'm saying is the Yankees right now, it's like watching a very boring documentary. With the Mets, it's like I'm watching Major League when you had Charlie Sheen. Charlie Sheen was in Major League, right? I'm pretty sure. You've seen that? Have you seen that
I've
film?
never seen Major League.
Oh, are you serious?
No.
It's where Charlie Sheen is on Cleveland, and you can look it up right now. You actually really should see this. Have you seen it, Surfer?
I can't say that I have. I've been sort of looking the other way here.
I am the only guy who's seen Major League. It's crazy. But Major League, just to give you guys a quick summary, is you're reading the summary right now, I guess. But the Cleveland, the Indians, as they were back then, were a terrible team, and then Charlie Sheen comes in and saves the franchise with his pitching, and he's supposed to be completely washed, but he ends up taking them all the way to the World Series. One of my favorite movies of all time.
So who's Charlie Sheen if this is the Mets? Is it Sean Manaea? Who's the guy?
That's a good one.
It's a good connection. No.
That is a.
I don't know.
I think it might be Manaea because Sheen was a pitcher in his role with Cleveland. Manaea has been excellent. He's been excellent. You could make the case for Peterson, but I think Manaea has really kind of taken the spotlight for just how well he's performed in key moments this year, as well as Peterson. I guess you could say it's interchangeable, but yeah, I think the Mets, it's like watching the movie Major League. It's a drama. It's exciting. It's lovable characters. With the Yankees, it's like watching a documentary that's mildly interesting, but it just puts you to sleep. It just puts you to sleep. When you go to Yankees games, it's like you're in a corporate, soulless place, and that's, to me, that's what it seemed. You got Warner laughing in the back.
Usually you get at least one person on a one-on-one who's a Yankees guy, just because there's so many of them here. There's nobody to push back against you.
I know.
There is.
I know.
Yes, there is. There is.
No Yankees fans.
It is our video producer, Lydia Perner, who's going to step in. I don't agree with anything she's going to say right now. I have my Red Sox hat on, but I figure
it's a crazy thing to say when they're in the ALCS to slander. Go ahead.
No,
Lid.
I'm not. Hold on. I'm not slandering the talent, but I'm saying in terms of the entertainment.
I'm not talking about the talent.
Hold on, Nick. In terms of the entertainment, it's not even close. It's not just how
they're winning.
It doesn't matter. I'm winning. Right? Think about right now. It's 3-on-1. Like I said, one
because
person.
You have a bad take.
One person of extraordinary genius versus three people who are struggling to keep up. Look, when I look at the Yankees, I love the talent, but even the talent is underperforming a little bit. They have amazing players, but the fact of the matter is they don't have a soul. The Yankees are like a credit card. You swipe in, you swipe out, and it's done. With the Mets, it's like looking at a photograph. It lasts for a lifetime. With the Yankees, I don't feel that. That's why I say the Mets are New York's team. The Mets are not a corporate, even though their team name, their home stadium name is Citi Field. So I guess they are sort of corporate. But my point is that the Mets have a soul.
Owned by the wealthiest owner in all of baseball.
The Mets have a soul. The Yankees, they just don't have a soul. It's the Yankees. Last thing I'll say before I'll let you speak, Liddy, is when you go to Yankee Stadium, you're taking a business partner out for a nice dinner and talking about a deal you're going to make, down on Wall Street. The Mets,
in the background,
Citi Field, yes. Citi Field is where you take your buddies to have a couple of drinks and have a great time. Yankee Stadium is not that place. It will never be that place. They're not that kind of team, and I'm proud of that. I'm so proud of this Mets team right now because they're exemplifying what it means to be a Met, and the Yankees are exemplifying what it means to be a Yankee, which means being great but being boring at the same time.
Ben, I was about this close from sending you a text being like awful takes. I just want to say, to start off with, the City Field get-in price for tickets for playoffs is more expensive than Yankee Stadium. So for your argument,
that can't be true.
For your argument
It
for
is
Yankee
true.
Stadium is filled with the suits, incorrect. If you're talking get-in price, that's the Mets. But I would say you've said some fairly rational things in the most irrational manner possible.
That's
I'm
my
not critiquing all of your takes. The Yankees have not been the most entertaining team to watch this postseason.
Thank
but
you.
that does not mean the energy is not there. That
Doesn't
does
mean
not
they don't
mean
have
the
a
Bronx
soul.
is not booming right now. They are not a soulless team. Aaron Judge might look like a soulless hitter right now, but I'm telling you, it's coming. He's going to have a Pete Alonso moment real soon. And I'm going to get back to you, and the Bronx is going to be booming. And when you guys lose to the Dodgers and Nick Palmer's partying around and the Yankees are in the World Series, who's going to have the aura
Well, you can't
now?
have two teams.
well,
Don't
but-
every
yeah.
time Nick
Well,
Palmer
he's
gets brought up, I
just-
get angry
No,
because you
yeah.
can't root for both the
Yeah,
Dodgers
that's not
and the
allowed.
Yankees.
If he's
I don't
listening-
care what the rationale is.
It's off limits.
Like, what if they face each other in the? You just clap the whole game
Yeah.
if they face
No,
each other in
just-
the World Series.
Just how Nick's a Kings and an Islanders fan doesn't make any sense. It's a total disgrace. But I'll tell you what, Nick, if you're listening, you better be ready. I hope you're ready. I hope you have less than a week, Nick. You have less than a week because New York is coming to town Sunday. New York is coming to sunny California, and they're gonna make a storm out there in sunny L.A.
I never do this, but I'll defend Nick Palmer real quickly. I think the only reason
That's 4-on-1. It's 4-on-1 against extraordinary genius.
He likes these odds.
No. Well, no, I wasn't gonna say that I like the fact that he roots for both teams.
Oh, okay.
I was just gonna say there is more of a story. You said that Kings and Islanders makes no sense. He's from Los Angeles and has family in Long Island that he's like spent much time in like his formative years visiting and growing up with. So both teams hold a very soft spot in his heart.
It's also not like the Islanders are like this evil empire.
So that's the
Well,
thing.
in the 80s we were.
Right,
but the Dodgers and the Yankees are both evil empires.
Oh, they
no,
are.
No, so that's what I was going to get
That's
to.
why
is
the
I don't
souls.
is that I don't have a problem with Nick having like a sentimental connection with New York teams because like he visited his family and everything. I just hate him because the two teams he roots for are good at the same time. It's like you have the two best rosters basically. Well, one of the best rosters. You could argue about the Yankees. They are a great roster, but you have unequivocally the greatest roster of like basically the 21st century in just general construction. And then the Yankees, who are just a powerhouse of a team, and you're rooting for both of them.
But they're not playing like a powerhouse, Jack. They're not playing.
That's not the point, Ben. The point was it's frustrating that Nick. I don't have a problem that Nick roots for both teams. It's that the fact that Nick has two teams and they're both as good as that is it's like me rooting for. It's like me in the 2010s rooting for the Red Sox and the Giants. It's like. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like they traded off World Series from 2007 to 2018. It's like, I don't know.
You can't lose, sort of
Well,
situation.
You know, it's. I do think the Yankees. They have a good shot of making the World Series, arguably a better shot than the Mets.
I think
but-
they do a
but-
bit better.
But it's not. It's not going to be. Trust me. There's not going to be the excitement if it's only. Let's say. I'm just throwing a hypothetical out there. If the Mets make the World Series and the Yankees don't, there's going to be more excitement in this city for baseball than if the Yankees make the World Series and the Mets don't. I'm telling you right now, when the Mets make the World Series, it's pandemonium. 2015 was pandemonium. We had that series stolen from us for a lot of different reasons.
We choked in
Well,
game 1
all right.
and game 4 and game 5.
Well, that was because of poor decision making.
Do we look
and
past
management.
those, Ben? Do we just sort of overlook?
I think
we're
this-
not going to get into it. but
yeah.
We blew it. We blew it. We had a chance. We blew it.
Okay, but I'm saying that this time around, if it's the Mets in the World Series and it's not the Yankees, New York's going to be more excited about that because this Mets team is more lovable. It's more entertaining. It's more engaging to watch. The Yankees, like I said, it's competent. It's a quiet competence, but it's also in terms of the players. the Yankees, as I noted, are not playing up to their full potential. The Mets are. New Yorkers love hustle. They love grit. They love going the extra mile. The Mets are doing that. They're punching above their weight. They punched above their weight against your home team. They did it against the Phillies. The awful city of Philadelphia was in mourning after what happened. And the Yankees have been, to me, they've been kind of sheepishly making their way through this postseason. And nobody wants a sheepish World Series. They want an electric World Series, in the words of Khalib Stein. They want something that fans from across the country are going to tune into because the Mets are beloved in terms of their underdog character.
Okay.
The Yankees do not have
Here's
that.
the last thing I'll say before we have to go to break. The Yankees have had less opportunity. Like, the Yankees had a better regular season than the Mets. That's why they've had less moments to be fun. Like, they didn't have to go through a wild card series. They didn't have to get in the playoffs at game 161 with a Lindor clutch home run.
Oh, it's not their style.
They did no. They also have a whole ALCS now to prove you wrong that they are fun. I don't think they are fun, but
Thank you, Nick.
but I think you've gone a little far in terms of the soulless. I know a lot of Yankee fans who care a lot and go to Yankee Stadium, have a good time with their buddies, get a couple brews in. They do exist, but I think the bottom line is a win's a win, and the Yankees are in the exact same spot as the Mets are. Even though the Mets it's been more fun, I think, to watch the Mets run, but the Yankees are just as close to a World Series.
Frank? Yeah, well, got to be honest, I'm being handed a pretty hot baton here.
Just give us your quick take.
Absolutely, short and sweet here. Ben obviously makes a great point with the Yankees sort of appearing like the Galactic Empire. Judge having that Darth Vader-esque command over the dugout as of right now. But I do have to second his point in terms of the electricity of the Mets as a general. And to quote Alonso very quickly, what's the point if you're not having fun? That's part of the culture here, and we're not afraid to embrace the fun part of the game. So that'll be my closer.
Well, that was a entertaining segment.
Got a little off the rails, but it's okay.
Yeah,
it was fun.
It wouldn't be a Ben Oppenheimer one-on-one without going a little off the rails. But when we come back, we're going to talk some chaos going on over in MetLife, talking about the New York Jets, Robert Saleh firing, and some other issues with the team as well. You've been listening to WFUV Sports' One-on-One. We'll be right back.
You're listening to One-on-One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org.
Welcome back to One-on-One on WFUV Sports. I'm Ben Oppenheimer, along with Nick Guzman and Frank Spicuzza. Just letting our listeners know that this is a pre-recorded show. We're live on YouTube, so if you're watching on YouTube, it's obviously live. But if you're tuning in at 90.7 this evening, we are conducting this broadcast during the day, so a little bit of a delay there. So you heard us talking about the Tigers-Guardians game at 1 p.m. Obviously, by 11 p.m., if you're listening, you will have known the result of that series. So kind of a way to time travel, if you will, speaking to you into the future. But we talked some postseason baseball. We talked some postseason baseball in New York. Now let's stay in New York, but switch over to, I guess, what is now America's pastime. It used to be baseball. Now it's football, most would agree. I wish it was still baseball. But look, we got to talk some New York Jets. A lot of chaos going on over there in the Meadowlands. Robert Saleh fired abruptly. Kind of a shocking move, or some would say not shocking. I know I was talking to Bobby about this actually a week or so ago. He mentioned during On the Record that he thinks Saleh was going to get fired, and so he did the next day, I believe. You talk about the things that are going wrong for this Jets team. They're 2-3. They were expected to be better. They have a healthy Aaron Rodgers now, but they still lost to Denver. That hurts. Losing to Denver at home is tough. And then San Francisco, that's a good team. I don't really think there's much angst about losing to the 49ers in your opener at San Francisco. But the losses against Denver and Minnesota, I think, hurt. And so a lot of times in situations in any sport, when you're a team that's struggling and it's hard to place blame on any one particular person, if you're a GM, the blame usually goes to the head coach, because you have to appear like you're making a move. If you're a GM of a struggling or a bad team, you have to give the optics of, I'm making a change. We're adjusting. We're trying to reconfigure things. And so in that sense, they had to make the move to fire Robert Saleh, because a lot of things are going wrong for the Jets this season. And it's you could argue it's more difficult to trade or waive players who are not doing well than it is to fire a head coach, which is kind of the trigger-happy decision when GMs see a struggling team. So I want to know what you guys think of this decision. Is it the right decision? How does this impact the Jets moving forward in their somewhat disappointing season so far? Where do they go from here?
Well, there's so many different things that go into this. Like, I feel like head coaches a lot of the times get fired after they, like, quote unquote, lose the locker room, or it seems like the players don't respect them anymore, or for whatever reason.
Do you think he lost the locker room?
No, because everything that players have, like Sauce Gardner said, we're still doing it for him. Like, we're still doing it for Robert Saleh. He said that yesterday. Like, that's not a quote from somebody who, like, wanted the head coach to get fired. It seemed like he had the buy-in of at least most of the group. Maybe not Aaron Rodgers, the sort of the ongoing conspiracy theory, although he's denied it, is, I don't even know if it's a conspiracy theory, it's a very plausible theory, is that Aaron Rodgers wanted Robert Saleh gone, and he kind of told Woody Johnson to pull the trigger on that, and they did. Even if he didn't, either way, Saleh's gone. And to me, I think a change needed to be made, but a lot of people, and I think the move that I would have made would be like fire Nathaniel Hackett, the offensive coordinator, and get a new mind offensively in there. They've pretty much stripped Hackett of all his responsibilities. He's not calling the plays anymore, and it seems like they offered for him to leave the organization, and he opted to stay. So I think Nathaniel Hackett at this point is pretty much just collecting a paycheck when he shows up to work. But Todd Downing, the former offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans, who doesn't have a whole lot of a track record of success calling plays for Tennessee. He's going to call the plays Monday against the Bills. So it's a new-look Jets team. Jeff Ulbrich now the interim head coach. I think something had to change, but like Rodgers was saying in his interviews after this happened, like, this wouldn't have happened if he played better. And I have to agree. The Jets have put all their eggs in the Aaron Rodgers basket, and he's a 40-year-old aging quarterback, clearly on the decline, threw 3 picks against the Vikings in London, wasn't good against the Broncos either the week before. That's back-to-back bad losses. And I think the reason why Saleh was fired, I think Woody Johnson, the Jets owner, views like the team that they've assembled here, that Joe Douglas has assembled, the GM, as a team that's ready to compete in the playoffs and potentially win a Super Bowl. Like when he looks at the roster and what they've done, bringing in Aaron Rodgers and everything that they did in this offseason to improve, that they're supposed to make the playoffs and maybe win a Super Bowl this year. And it hasn't looked like that on the field. So if you think you've put all your eggs in the right basket, then I guess you fire the coach and see what happens. But I think it's tough to see what the impact's going to be, especially when it doesn't seem like all of the players are really on board with this. But I think maybe potentially the bigger move is that someone else is going to be calling the plays on offense. But, no matter who's calling the plays, Aaron Rodgers can't throw 3 picks. Like, he can't do that if you want to win a game, no matter who's calling the plays on offense. And the offensive line was supposed to be better this year. It has been a little bit, but it's still not really at the level that you need to make a run in the playoffs. And I don't think 2 weeks ago that anybody, after that win against the Patriots on September 19th, that Thursday night game, I don't think anybody would think that just, 2 weeks later that all this dysfunction and all this chaos would occur in the Jets organization. But it has, and it's not too late to salvage the season. They're only 2-3, but it's going to be different leadership getting it done. And there were some rumblings early in the season that, and even before the season, that if things weren't going well, like Robert Saleh could be fired at the end of this season. For the Jets to do it in the middle of the season, it's a pretty crazy move and a drastic thing to do.
Yeah, and I just want to note that a report from Bleacher Report from yesterday said that Saleh's firing was not a drawn-out process at all. And during an appearance on the Bill Simmons podcast, Peter Schrager of NFL Network and Fox Sports reported that Saleh's firing meeting took approximately 10 minutes. So this is what he said. Tuesday morning, Saleh comes in. He's told, just come and sit down. And it's both Johnson brothers and maybe a couple other people on the highest of levels within the Jets organization. And they said directly to him, thanks for your service here. We need a spark. We don't like the way the team's playing. You're done, and there will be no contract extension. That's pretty abrupt. And it seems, talking about needing a spark, this is a type of decision that they're hoping can just radically change something, which I don't really think it will. I just think in general, firing head coaches, it usually doesn't do much unless they're like really, really bad, which I don't think Robert Saleh was a really bad head coach. I thought he was middle of the road, maybe slightly above average, but it's all subjective. But now I also think the disadvantages of firing your coach when you have not lost the locker room is now the interim is in a difficult position of picking up the pieces, being a leader, and kind of having that disjointed leadership where it's one person, then a new person coming in. That can cause a lot of chaos and confusion and chemistry issues for a team that didn't need to be created. It was created unnecessarily. So I don't think it was a good decision. Some Jets fans may disagree. I'm not really a Jets fan. I'm more of a Giants fan, but I'm a very lukewarm football fan. So I don't hate the Jets at all. And I think, they may end up regretting this situation, not because it's Robert Saleh's a be-all, end-all, but it's because of the instability that this creates in the middle of this season, not even in the middle of it.
This move just feels freakishly impulsive. It really makes no sense.
It feels like Woody Johnson, who used to be the ambassador to the UK,
right?
Got embarrassed in front of all of his buddies out there during the London game and was got embarrassed and had to make a move to try to make his franchise better. And that's what it feels like.
And I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist here, but I won't. But something worse, something bad had to have happened. Like it had to have been a locker room incident or this is something that has been manifesting. He's lost the locker room for a while. There has to be something way worse. Because while I do think they played pretty horrendously in London, I don't think week 5 there's ever that big of a reason to fire a coach right then and there and think that an interim from there on out, if you still think you have a team that can compete for a Super Bowl, I don't know why you would ever think that coaching with an interim would give you a better chance of doing that. But they could prove me wrong. But the other thing I'll say before I finish here is Evan Harkin and I did an interview with Rich Cimini, their ESPN reporter, before the season started. And I asked Rich, is this a high leverage season for Saleh? Is he coaching with his job on the line? And Cimini said yes, like that absolutely it is. And he said if this team doesn't make the playoffs, he thought Saleh would be fired. But one of the things that he said was the reason that they are still sticking with Saleh was because it seemed like Rodgers had taken a liking to him, and it seemed like they wanted to allow him to have one full season with Rodgers as their quarterback. And that's what Cimini said. So it's just, to me, this just feels it makes no sense, and I think something way worse had to have happened behind closed doors.
So you think there's more at play here?
I think I'm not talking like criminal type stuff, but I'm talking like there might be some serious relationship issues behind closed doors that led to this. That's the only conclusion I can think of that would justify this impulsive of a decision.
Surfer guy?
Yeah, no, I'd have to second Jack's point that there was something that did not make it to Bleacher Report, something that did not make it to Twitter that is causing a lot of this inner turmoil. And like you had said, and that I actually hadn't heard, his way of being fired, just come and sit down.
Yeah.
That sounds like something I would be told in high school.
Yeah,
you know
principal.
what I mean? Yeah,
Did you get in trouble much in high school?
Once in a blue moon, just enough to be familiar with what Mr. Saleh had heard in the boardroom. So, but no, again, completely out of left field on their part. I think it was something to sort of justify their purchase of Rodgers, obviously running out last season with the American flag, ready to make something happen, and we all know how that went. So with an underwhelming performance so far in the 2024 season, I think his back was against the wall. I think one of you guys might have said that, but either way, he certainly felt the pressure, and as did the owner, which definitely led to the firing. And I mean, Colin Cowherd seconds this by saying, it's not how you do business, but this is how the Jets do business. So, once again, rebuttaling that point of definitely something happening, whether it be Rodgers, whether it be, Gardner, any of them, even Neighbors with his recent drama following his injury could have caused or at least contributed to the absence of Mr. Saleh.
Yeah, I think just no matter who the head coach is, like, I don't think Aaron Rodgers is good enough to lead this team to the promised land.
Hurts my heart.
You think his best days are behind him?
He's 40 years old.
He looks good for 40.
Yeah, but even his last year in Green Bay was nowhere near to the standard that his previous MVP seasons were. And then he misses all of last year, and he hasn't looked all that sharp this season. I think, maybe a different play caller is going to open things up for him. I think we have to wait and see whether or not Downing calling the plays is going to make a difference. But he's a guy who didn't have the best tenure in Tennessee. So I don't think he's going to be like a savant and all of a sudden open things up for this offense. But it's possible that just a different look and maybe some different ideas just about, the sequence of calling plays or just literally just a different mind in charge. Maybe that'll change something. But I think it was an impulsive decision, like Jack said and like everyone said. And I think I just don't really see it providing a spark because it's not like he was clearly the thing that was holding them back. Like, you change something, but a lot of the problems are still there. I mean, you change two things in terms of changing the play caller too, but personnel-wise, I don't think Aaron Rodgers is good enough to take this team where they want to go. And I don't think it really matters who's coaching the team. It definitely matters who's coaching the team, but I think no matter who it is, Aaron Rodgers doesn't quite have it anymore to take this team to where they want to go.
Well, quite a pessimistic take from our very own Nick Guzman. I think that'll just about wrap it up for our New York Jets segment. And for our next segment, we're going to stay at MetLife. We're going to talk some New York Giants, Daniel Jones,
some Travis Scott.
Some Travis Scott. Yes, we will get into that right away when we come back. But you've been listening to One-on-One on WFUV Sports. We'll be right back.
What's up, everyone? I'm Evan Harkin, your New York Jets beat reporter for the 2024 season. Stay up to date with all things white and green from MetLife Stadium. From Aaron Rodgers touchdowns to Sauce Gardner interceptions, I've got you covered. So join me and Gang Green on Twitter at EvHarkin and stay locked in with the JETS on WFUV, your home for New York sports.
Welcome back to One-on-One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show on WFUV Sports. I'm Ben Oppenheimer, alongside here with Nick Guzman and Frank Spicuzza. We're going to talk some Giants, but before we get into the New York Giants, very briefly, there's an update with the New York Mets. It was just reported that the Mets are considering dropping a pitcher to keep Acuna and add McNeil to the NLCS roster. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jack, but I'm pretty sure I just got that right. So we will keep you updated on that if there's any changes. But that appears to be what the rumors are saying in Queens. So we'll see what happens with that.
Adam Ottavino's had 9 lives, but I think this might be his time.
You think
I think it might be Ottavino's time.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Ottavino certainly a integral part of Mets relief during this season. But to get back into football, the New York Giants, it's interesting. They have a record that's the same as the Jets. They're 2-3. The Giants definitely had worse expectations for this year than the Jets did. And you could say that maybe the Giants are even playing slightly above expectations. They've been competing. They didn't exactly compete against Minnesota for their home opener September 8th. They lost 28-6 in that one. But I think in these other games, they've been keeping it fairly competitive, and they've been getting some wins out of it too. They beat Cleveland 21-15, and they just beat Seattle in Seattle 29-20. Our WFUV alum, Bridge Gotham, was at that game. He traveled over to that game. He was a Giants beat reporter from last season, so I'm sure he enjoyed seeing that win on the road in Seattle. But looking at these Giants, I would say the surprise story. There's a positive surprise, and there's also a negative surprise. Let's get to the negative first so we get to the positive to kind of make up for it. So Malik Neighbors has a concussion. He's going through concussion protocol. He has concussion symptoms. And generally when you have a concussion, the doctors say the right thing to do is to go to a Travis Scott concert. No, do not.
Apparently, Fiend cures all concussions.
Yes. Well, in all seriousness, we got Jack. He's aching to. I know
you're Travis Scott, and he's itching to get on the mic.
Yeah.
I mean, well, first of all, Nick hit it right on the head. I'm a lifelong Travis Scott. Well, he hasn't been playing music my whole life, but a several-year Travis Scott diehard. I've been in the pit twice. I've been hit in many different ways in the pit. It's a crazy experience. No, all jokes aside, I do just want to say one thing. it feels very like, I don't know. It just feels very like armchair quarterback. I think some of the hate that Malik Neighbors is getting. It could be any concert. I don't care if it's Travis Scott. Like, take my fandom out of it. I just think it's very sitting at home on the couch wanting to hate on something-esque. I understand the health of football players is important. He's a good wide receiver. They need him on the field, right? But he's not cleared to play, and he hasn't been practicing. I understand that. I get all of that. And if he's in the pit doing mosh pits, jumping up and down and like going crazy, yeah, that's a really bad look. But the one problem I have when people get upset about these kind of things is it's like, I feel like no one ever thinks of professional athletes as humans. They just think of them as these pawns that you spend money on to entertain you. He doesn't have to be bedridden just because he has a concussion. If it's one, like I said, if he's out there moshing and bumping into people and doing all that kind of stuff, that's a big issue. But if he just attended,
how do we know he's not doing that, Jack? How do we know he?
I don't, Ben. That's not my point. Again, that's not my point. My point is, he doesn't have to be bedridden because he has a concussion. He's recovering. He's not cleared to play. So Pete Alonso went to a Zach Bryan concert the night after, or right after going 0 for opening day, and the Mets were terrible.
I think it's just the fact that he's still reportedly having concussion symptoms.
Yeah, that's like Nick going to Parker House on the Jersey Shore if he had a concussion. You know?
I don't know. I just don't think a concussion.
It's exactly like that.
I just don't think a concussion has to put you on house arrest. Like if it's.
We also don't know what specific symptoms he's like experiencing.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
I don't know. I think
it's. I think it's an easy headline, but I think I've had concussions before, and
I'm sorry to hear that.
I'm okay now. Believe it or not.
Good.
Do I seem all there?
Oh, people probably think I have a permanent concussion when they hear me speaking on the radio. So,
it's just when you hear someone has concussion symptoms, and then like, it's not like he went to like a classical music like orchestral thing, or like something like a Broadway show. Like, I feel like Travis Scott is like the most intense thing you could possibly do to your brain.
Yeah,
but I'm not going to criticize him for it because, number one, he's really good at football and I like him a lot. Number two, I think he's going to be out this week. I don't think this is like pushing back his recovery at all. Like, I think playing football and going to Travis Scott is like, they're two different things. Like, getting your brain bashed in by, free safeties and middle linebackers. Especially the way the Giants have been throwing the ball to Malik Neighbors, like suicide routes, essentially, in the game against the Cowboys specifically.
Well, maybe that's why he's getting concussions.
It is literally why he's getting concussions, because they were sending him into the middle of the field. Like,
this guy Nick Guzman gets it, man. He gets it. And again, one more thing. It was a Travis Scott concert. All of you would go to a Travis Scott concert.
I prefer Juice WRLD when he was around.
There you go.
But anyway, I think it's like a fun midweek storyline for some people to get riled up on talk radio, like we are now a little bit. But I don't think it's that big of a deal at the end of the day. I think what's a bigger deal is that the Giants aren't that bad. Like, they're low-key kind of good. Like, they should have won that. They should be 3-2. Okay, arguably 4-1. The Washington game where they lost 21-18 was a sham of a game. This was so long ago, but I've never gotten this off my chest, so I feel like this is now my time to do so.
Yeah,
let it off.
Speak to us.
Graham Gano, the Giants kicker, was banged up before the game. They knew that. They had a chance to activate another kicker. They didn't do so. Graham Gano, tore his hamstring on the opening kickoff. Giants have no kicker. They missed the extra point with Jamie Gillen. They have to go for 2 on every 2-point conversion, and they don't let the Commanders score a touchdown the whole game, and they get beat by field goals, and they don't have a kicker themselves. It was so frustrating. If they had a healthy kicker, they would have won that game. But bottom line is they didn't. They're 2-3, whatever. But the Seattle game, I think there's a lot of positives to take away from that Seattle Seahawks game. Going on the road to Seattle, and Daniel Jones seems to play well the further away he is from Giants Stadium. But, you didn't have Devin Singletary in that game either. You didn't have Malik Neighbors. And Tyrone Tracy steps up with 129 rushing yards out of the backfield. Darius Slayton over 100 yards receiving on 8 catches and a touchdown. And Daniel Jones really efficient, 257 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, and then also some work on the ground too. It seems like Daniel Jones, a little of the narrative that's come out this week is that Daniel Jones plays well on the road because he has to deal with Giants fans, which I think is a little bit true, but also, like, come on, dude, you got it. Like, it's also on you to perform. Like, he was bad against the Cowboys at home on that Thursday night game. I was there. He was not
stressed
good.
out.
Maybe he was stressed out, but I feel like as a professional athlete, as the quarterback of the New York Giants, you have to have a little bit of mental fortitude
Right.
in those situations. But I think the Seattle win was big, and now that you got a Bengals team that's really struggled this year on Sunday Night Football coming up tomorrow, although I don't think I can watch that game because I have to watch the Mets. They're at the exact same time, the Mets, Mets and Giants. But you know, you think about if you can win that game on your home turf on Sunday Night Football against a 1-4 Bengals team, and you're 3-3, and who knows? It's frustrating because you see some of the way that these early season games went, like the Cowboys game where the Giants couldn't punch the ball in the end zone, the Washington game where they didn't have a kicker, and you think you could be in a better spot. But I think bottom line is people after week 1, people were saying this Giants team needs to like tank. They're not bad enough to tank.
Yeah.
Like they're gonna win, I think, 7, 8, 9 games this season, which might, you know,
It's not what people thought.
it might ruin their future, considering that might knock them out of contention to getting one of the star quarterbacks coming up in this draft class. But I think this Giants team, they're pretty decent, and you know, I enjoyed watching their game against the Seahawks.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Warner said back there, talking about players being human beings, not being pawns. Let's apply that to Daniel Jones. I mean, he has anxiety, I'm sure, going out there. I mean, just think about the pressure of being in a stadium of 50,000 people playing against a huge, bitter divisional rival. I think there's a lot of pressure that comes along with that. And you have to give Daniel Jones credit. Look, this has been a 5-year saga with this guy.
I think it's finally the last year. No matter what he does, I think it has to be the last year.
You think so?
I just, it's been too middling for too long.
I sort of agree with that, but he may prove us wrong this season.
I think even if he has a good enough year, like I think this is it.
I mean, right now Daniel Jones is having a better season than Hall of Fame quarterback Aaron Rodgers. Daniel Jones right now has got 1,138 passing yards on the year. You look at Rodgers. Rodgers has 1,093. Then you look at the average. Daniel Jones right now is averaging 6.4 and 227 yards per game. Rodgers 218 yards per game. Daniel Jones is the best quarterback in New York right now, which is not what people would have thought coming into the season, and not what they would have thought a year ago when all the hype was about Aaron Rodgers, coming in. And Jack's staring me down right now. I don't know if he disagrees. He took his shirt off. He's going hardcore. Well, not a shirt
Just to
off,
clarify, he's still wearing a t-shirt. He took off
yeah,
his sweater.
He took off his sweater.
He's not shirtless.
But you see
in the back
you
of
see the
studio.
muscles now. So he
Although
had to,
I do wish.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I got to get Jack's workout routine. But
You're making me blush. All of you. You're making me blush.
But Daniel Jones,
yeah,
no, he's been good. Like,
yeah.
Except for those games that he wasn't good. Like week 1, he was
Yeah.
god awful. Against the Cowboys, he was pretty terrible too, especially with the deep ball. And it's just frustrating because one week he looks like a very competent NFL quarterback, and the next week he's seeing ghosts.
Yeah.
And it looks like he doesn't know how to run an offense.
Yeah, it almost reminds me of, the Patrick Star meme where one of them is like him analyzing like scientifically, like with glasses on, and then another one is where Patrick has like the wooden chip on his head, and
nails
like
sticking
that's the Daniel Jones comparison is
week to week.
Is week to week.
Yeah.
It's like the scientist, and then other weeks it's like just looks like a complete fool out there. But Surfer Guy, from your perspective, you're from Wisconsin. Are you a Green Bay fan?
I am.
So I want to get your take on what you think of the comparison of Daniel Jones and Aaron Rodgers, and I know we're done talking Jets, but how do you think Daniel Jones is doing this year in comparison to his other MetLife counterpart?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously, I have to deflate the minor cheesehead ego. Obviously had beyond high hopes for Mr. Rogers, but it seems as though he's gone the other way. So the one thing I will say, though, especially in comparison for them, is that in my mind, at least, not sure how you two feel about this. Not only in age and a million other factors, but they are just literally two different types of quarterbacks.
So different.
Completely white and black, literally, just absolutely.
One's had a good career.
Exactly. Yeah, right. Absolutely.
That's brutal, Nick. That's brutal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But no, so two completely different types of quarterbacks. I think, not to completely circle back to the Jets, but I think Rodgers' primary role now with, the absence of Salah for the time being is to lead in the locker room. And I think that's where he's going to find a lot of his success or, his quota reaching potential for the remainder of this season. Whereas Jones, I think he has been inconsistent, like you said, incredible Patrick Starr connection there. But the inconsistency is what needs to change. On the defensive front, the Giants have been pretty much unstoppable. Going back to that Seahawks game, 7 sacks against Geno Smith.
Especially the defensive line.
Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence, could go on and on. Absolutely unstoppable. So the defense has certainly been consistent. Shutting down an offensive powerhouse like the Seahawks is no small feat. So I think that if the Giants, primarily Daniel Jones and now Neighbors, are able to, tie off some loose ends and square away what generally needs to be done, I think that they will be able to see a much more consistent run, especially in the postseason. I'm very excited to see what they can do, especially in this following week.
And in that game against the Seahawks, it got off to probably the worst possible start the Giants could have gotten off to. You drive all the way down to the 1 yard line, and it's like an amazing drive, probably the best opening drive the Giants have had in so long. Mm-hmm. And then you fumble on the goal line, and the Seahawks return it 99 yards for a touchdown, and all of a sudden you're down 7-0. And that's the kind of stuff that seems like happens to the Giants a lot. But to their credit, they bounced right back. A similar thing happened in the game against Cleveland, where opening kickoff return for a touchdown by the Browns, and they just got off to a terrible start. And being able to bounce back from those situations, it's impressive that you can start the game in such a horrible fashion and still be able to come back and win. I think it just makes you think, what if the Giants didn't start games like that? And what if they started off, on the front foot doing the right things? I think it's a team that has talent, and I think they should be better than 2-3, and I think they will finish the season, like I said, with 8 or 9 wins. But it's just about if Daniel Jones can put together the kind of performance he had against the Seahawks or against Cleveland on a week-to-week basis. And it's a big if, because he hasn't done that so far. A Sunday night game against the Bengals, a Bengals defense that's gotten pretty much torn apart every time they've stepped out there this season. The conditions couldn't be better for a breakout game in MetLife, which Daniel Jones has been due for. And the Giants also just need to find a way to score an offensive touchdown in MetLife Stadium, which is something they don't normally do.
Yeah. So do you think Daniel Jones has, let's say you're betting, right? And I'm not a betting man. I condemn it. But let's say you're betting. Does Daniel Jones have a career-type game on Sunday?
No, I wouldn't bet on that. You'd be insane to bet on that.
Oh boy. Okay.
Oh.
So you're not.
There's a chance he has a good.
You trust him as far as you can throw him, even if he's been doing
zapped
okay.
He's not proven himself to be a consistent NFL quarterback on a week-to-week basis, and I think the conditions are all there for him to have a really strong game and get the Giants back to 500 in a big primetime win against the Bengals. Is he going to do that, or is he going to throw 2 picks and lose a fumble? It's the Daniel Jones experience. I've been on this ride since 2019, and I'm a little bit sick of it, but not every once in a while, pretty often he plays well. It's just those times where he doesn't that make the Giants such a tough watch sometimes.
Surfer guy.
Well, I mean, you say tough watch, and I think that circles back to a point that I think I'm unfortunately starting to turn into a dead horse, is that of the inconsistency shown throughout him. Circling back to Ben's bet wager, if you will, with regard to a season or career spanning game this Sunday, I'd have to second you, Nick. I don't see it happening. I really don't.
I think it could, but I wouldn't bet on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Exact same here. It's anything is possible with a player like that. That's on one hand been able to completely lose track of where the ball is within his own hands and lose the fumble. Whereas on other hands, throw for 2 touchdowns, 67% completion, and over 250 yards. And that was just against Seattle, to name one of the few good games that he's had this season. So I honestly think it's, and this, could be viewed as a lazy response, but I think it's too soon to call. I really have a hard time of, seen it through there. He's had approximately about 5 to 6 seconds, an increase in time
the
in the
line's
pocket.
definitely been better.
The line has been holding an incredible front there, absolutely holding down the fort. So I think if he's able to stay in cahoots and good communication with his line, realize that they have been doing quite better, especially than my own Packers or to name a few teams. But no, I think if he's able to utilize this time he has on his hands, this very apparent time, we'll be able to see potentially a season high this Sunday.
The one other thing I'd mention is, as this thought came to my head, it's really easy to become a Daniel Jones apologist. Like, okay, so week 1 against the Vikings, like no one thought the Vikings were going to be any good. Like it was like, okay, Sam Darnold's the quarterback as J.J. McCarthy got hurt. Mm-hmm. So I think Giants fans were looking at that game as like a must-win game, opening up at home against a team that isn't really supposed to be all that good this year. Well, the Vikings are good. They're 5-0, and like, is it just they faced a good team week 1 and maybe Daniel Jones is a good quarterback? And that awful performance week 1, which was really so terrible on all fronts from this Giants team. But the Vikings are a good team, and so are the Cowboys. So it's like, it's so hard to the whiplash you get with Daniel Jones and with the Giants in general is crazy. But I think they've got a good defensive front. One of the best in football, I think, like you mentioned, Frank, it was on display in that Seattle game, whether it was Brian Burns, Leonard Williams, whoever it was, Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, getting the pressure on Geno Smith. Their defense can hold the fort. It's also exciting. I think Tyrone Tracy's going to get more and more carries, even if Devin Singletary comes back, because of how electric he was in that Seattle game. And you think about what they did without Malik Neighbors, what happens when they get Neighbors back? Like, there's excitement around this Giants team. And even though it doesn't really feel like it, I think baseball's maybe overshadowing it a little bit. The drama with the Jets is overshadowing it a little bit. Even for me personally, like that Seattle game was at the same time as game 2 of the Philly series. I was watching Mets-Phillies. I wasn't watching the Giants game, which I'm normally a guy who's going to be watching the Giants every Sunday. Just there's a lot happening right now in the New York sports sphere, if you want to say. But I think don't be surprised if the Giants win this weekend and put together a really, really average campaign of 8 to 9 wins, which, I think not a lot of people had them pegged to do.
That is true. I mean, they're defying expectations.
They're not going to blow you away and win 11 games, but
8
to 9.
Look, if I was a betting man, and I'm not, but if I'm a bettor, I'm saying, talk about blowing people away, talk about defying expectations, Daniel Jones will have the best game of his career in the regular season on Sunday. He's going to rip.
If you're listening, please be very careful about placing a wager on that.
Yeah, I was
because, but go ahead, Ben. I think we just need a disclaimer.
He's going to rip this Bengals defense apart, and I don't see any reason why he wouldn't. I think Daniel Jones is going to show why he's been the prodigal son all along.
I hope so.
And
I hope so.
We're
one-on-one is not financially liable for any bet on Daniel Jones this weekend. We do not. Ben Oppenheimer does not speak or reflect the overall financial beliefs or betting odds of one-on-one.
Well spoken.
Thank you for the disclaimer.
Yes,
that was much
yeah,
needed. That was much needed. Because I'm worried someone's going to put like their mortgage on
bet the house.
The house on Daniel Jones.
They said it on WFUV. It had to.
On.
Like no, it's
Ben Oppenheimer said it on WFUV.
And then if they get it wrong, it's like I want to go to his house. And, I'm going to show him a lesson. Hopefully not.
Yeah,
God forbid. I shouldn't even spoke that into existence. But look, we've had 2 great football segments. Now we're going to go into some basketball for the next segment. We're going to talk the New York Liberty's run this season, and now they're in the finals, how they've been doing so far in the finals. Can they avenge their finals loss from last year? A lot to talk about in the Liberty segment up next, but you've been listening to WFUV Sports' One-on-One. I'm Ben Oppenheimer. We'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Ryan Rucco, WFUV class of 2008. WFUV is your home for all things Fordham athletics, with live coverage of Fordham football, Fordham men's and women's basketball, in addition to our Saturday show, One-on-One. Stay right here on 90.7 FM for all things WFUV sports.
Welcome back to WFUV Sports' One-on-One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. We've been talking some postseason baseball. We've been talking some New York football. Now we're going to get into New York basketball, specifically some WNBA basketball. The New York Liberty, they're in the finals once again. They are they're down 1-0 in the series against the Lynx. And right now, you wonder in terms of, can they avenge last season's disappointing performance in the finals? And they're down 1-0, not exactly where they want to be. Minnesota had a great comeback in game one, but the Liberty have been in cruise control coming into the playoffs. And they've been cruising through the playoffs, and now it seems that they may have possibly hit a wall. Do they have a WNBA Finals issue? I think it's an interesting narrative to explore. And also, I just want to mention to our listeners, if you want to call in at 718-817-2750. I'll say it one more time, 718-817-2750, if you want to call in and ask us a question or tell us whatever is on your mind. But going back to this Liberty team, you have to give credit to Minnesota for pulling off that rally, that overtime victory over New York. Collier hitting a tie-breaking jump shot, 8.8 seconds left in overtime after they overcame an 18-point deficit early and then a 15-point deficit late. That kind of win is gutsy, and it's reminding me of the Mets kind of in a different sport making their way out of grinds and areas where it appeared that they were finished. I think Minnesota has some spark to them right now, and the Liberty may have an issue on their hands because this series thought it would be their coronation, but it may end up being a dogfight.
Well, first of all, that game one was one of the best basketball games I've seen in a very long time. When it comes to, you're down 18 if you're Minnesota in the second quarter, you come back from that, you're down 15 in the fourth quarter, and according to ESPN Analytics, the Liberty had a 99.2% chance to win the game when they were up 15 with 5 minutes and 20 seconds left. So, not even just that. At the end of regulation, Breanna Stewart gets fouled underneath the basket, gets a chance for two free throws to win the game, and she misses the game-winning free throw attempt on her second shot. That sends the game to overtime. She also misses the tying layup attempt at the end of overtime. Just for the Liberty, that's a loss that has to sting like so much, especially when you consider these WNBA finals still a best-of-5 series out there. So every game's so much more important. In a 7-game series, every game's important too. But when it's a 5-game series, the margin for error just gets smaller and smaller. And for the Liberty, it was, their star guards not really showing up and doing what you're accustomed to seeing them doing. especially from an efficiency perspective. You know, Brianna Stewart going just 6 of 21 shooting, did drop 18 points, but the 6 of 21, that's a rough mark. Sabrina Ionescu, 8 for 26 with 19 points. Like, those kinds of shooting numbers from your guards are going to make it tough to win games, but you have to give so much credit to the Lynx in terms of their resiliency. And, you know, I don't know if you guys saw that the 4-point play from Courtney Williams with 5 seconds left to go up 1. Like, just unbelievable, taking unbelievable clutch shots late in the game to keep themselves in it and to steal game 1 on the road against a Liberty team that I think everybody was kind of getting ready to coronate. Like, this is a really good Minnesota team, but it felt like, you know, last year was maybe a year too early for the Liberty, considering just how good the Aces were. It was going to be really hard for anybody to beat the Aces last year. But now it's like, this felt like it's supposed to be the Liberty's year, and then you blow game 1 in that fashion, and all of a sudden things are a little more worrisome, and game 2 becomes pretty much a must-win situation on Sunday.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I think without a shadow of a doubt, the easiest finger to point in this series, at least, is at the Liberty. Like you had mentioned, Ionescu and Brianna have, you know, while being the primary guards for the Liberty, have not really lived up to their full potential. The Liberty, keeping it really simple as they have for their regular season, they're an offensive team. That's how they're geared. Sabrina specializing from beyond the arc, and Brianna Stewart averaging 22 a game. So, you know, there's no shortage or fear when it comes to scoring or just, you know, having the ball in the vicinity of the other team's basket. However, what it comes down to is the defense, and Brianna Stewart said it herself, very plain and simply, basically just acknowledging the, you know, lack of, you know, defense. So basically just saying defensively, I think they executed better than us. That's what it came down to. So that's what the head coach, Sandy Brondello, said in cahoots with Brianna Stewart. So both were in agreement. It sounds like players and the coaching staff are in agreement that they were simply defensively beat out, which is needed in order to beat the Liberty. But if New York wants a chance to win this series, they're going to need to bolster their defenses as well. They're certainly primed for a deep playoff run, a deep, you know, continuation of the finals. But, you know, if they, you know, continue to struggle with their defensive consistency, then that firepower will amount to nothing.
Yeah, I think if you're Coach Brondello, you have reason to be worried right now. And maybe part of that is you talk about too much of a good thing, that the vibes were almost too good for most of this regular season into the playoffs, is that everything is going great in Brooklyn, and it's, you know, peaches and cream, it's perfect. And sometimes you need a wake-up call. You have to face adversity to really get that edge back. And when you lose that edge, you can kind of get this feeling that, oh, we're just going to waltz our way to a championship, which even if you're really good, you're better than your opponent, you should never have that attitude, because that's what leads to lapses like we saw last night. And, you know, when I look at who's performing on this team right now, Ionescu is leading with 20.4 points per game, averaging in the postseason. Brianna Stewart at 19.7, followed by Jonquel Jones. But one thing that worries me about Brianna Stewart is she is shooting much less efficiently than she was in the regular season. She is averaging 40.8% from the field during the postseason, during the playoffs. During the regular season, she was averaging 45% in terms of her shooting splits. That's a big drop-off, 5%. So I'm not sure what that's due to. Maybe it's the defenses in the playoffs adjusting to her better, guarding her more tightly in the post, or just doing something differently that makes it harder for her to do damage in the paint. But if Brianna Stewart is underperforming, I think that's kind of a microcosm of where the alarm bells as a team as a whole should start ringing is, your second best player is not quite where she should be in terms of production, and you need the absolute best out of all your players in moments like this. You can't let up. You can't let these mistakes, just whisk by you. And now they're down 1-0, and this was a game at Barclays. So they've lost one at home. Whenever you lose a game at home in any series, in any sport, it's not a good sign when you're the favored team heading into it. It wasn't a good sign for the Phillies when they lost. I can think of other teams, I'm sure off the top of my head, where they've lost game 1 or game 2 at home, and the other team has stolen one on their home court. I'm high on Minnesota right now. I think they have they're emboldened. They have momentum, and they're feeling confident right now. And I think the Liberty might have lost some of that ironclad confidence they had coming into the playoffs after what we saw last night, because they realized it's not going to be a cakewalk.
Yeah, and I think when you look at this Liberty team, especially in that game 1, like Jonquel Jones was probably Liberty's best offensive player in that game, both in terms of their leading scorer at 24 points, grabbing 10 boards, and just doing it in an efficient manner on 9 of 14 shooting. But you put together this roster in this way because, you have multiple sources of scoring and multiple options. Like if Sabrina Ionescu's having a bad day, then Jonquel Jones and Breanna Stewart can pick up the slack, and then vice versa if someone else is having a bad day. But I think for both guards, both for Stewart and Ionescu to really just have that poor nights in terms of shooting from the field, really put your team with your back against the wall. And even with that, you were up 15 with 5 minutes to go. No matter how poorly you've shot the ball in the game, you're up 15 with 5 minutes to go. It's the kind of loss that it's so hard to bounce back from, because it's like that. You're blowing that big of a lead in that big of a spot in that big of a game in game 1 of the WNBA Finals. You're going to learn a lot about the resiliency of this team depending on how they show up in game 2. Like, is this a group that's just going to lie down and kind of take that punch from Minnesota, or is it and will the narrative that they're a team that was crowned too early and they kind of drank the Kool-Aid, is that going to be it, or is it going to be that this team can bounce back from blowing that lead and get right back into these WNBA Finals? Because if they win game 2, it's really anybody's series. But if they lose that, it's 2-0. They're on the brink, going back to Minnesota, and that is a really, really tough place to be.
Tough is the right way to put it. I think if they find themselves heading to Minnesota on 2 losses, and again, much too soon to call it, but that might be the end of the series as I see it. Breanna Stewart not supposed to be performing in this manner. 2 times Finals MVP, no stranger to WNBA Finals. So while normally I like to play devil's advocate on a rookie or younger players or people that are new to a team, she has certainly been embedded in this Liberty offense especially. And so for her being the crux, a main cornerstone pillar, if you will, for this offense to be simply eradicated from the equation, or excuse, I suppose that was a bit of a stretch there, but to be certainly diminished by a large margin, will definitely, has already caused issues. The Liberty, typically averaging about 12.5 turnovers throughout the regular season, are now up to 15. Minnesota, like both of you had said, being a good and very observant team, they are not going to let that increase in turnovers slide by. They realize that, just because Sabrina and Breanna had an off night against them, that they will certainly come back firing. So I think they're going to be looking for, they being the Lynx, looking for any opportunity, primarily in the form of turnovers, but also rebounds as well, in order to put points on the board against the Liberty, recognizing the nuclear firepower, if you will, from all aspects, but primarily behind the arc when it comes to New York.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Lynx are like a hungry predator right now. They smell blood. They smell blood in the water, and they're going to go after it in Game 2. If the Liberty end up losing this finals, which I think is really going to be possible if they lose Game 2, they're going to be seen in their legacy from years from now, looking at great WNBA teams, is the Liberty, the 2023 and 2024 Liberty teams are going to be known as the teams that could not get it done. And that's not a way I'm sure these players want to be remembered. I mean, many of these players, they won an Olympic gold medal this year. They want to finish and add on to that with a WNBA championship and add to that list of prestigious awards and accomplishments and achievements. It's just a question of, really, I think Game 2 is the question of, is this a series where the Liberty are not going to let mistakes in Game 1 determine who they are for the rest of the duration, or are they just going to roll over and kind of do the same thing they did last year except worse? And I think that's it's entirely plausible that could happen. That's what I'm saying. If you're a Liberty fan, if you're Coach Brondello, if you're in the organization, I'm worried right now because I remember doing the All In podcast. I said Minnesota would be a more favorable matchup for the Liberty. I said either way, if it was Minnesota or Connecticut, it would be an easy series for the Liberty. But they're proving me wrong. They're proving the experts wrong. And sports is all about proving the experts wrong. You saw that in the Dodgers-Padres series, talking about baseball. You're seeing it now, talking basketball, WNBA, Liberty, Lynx. We will see what happens. Game 2 of Liberty Lynx is going to be, looking at the schedule, it's going to be tomorrow at 3 p.m.
And Barclays Center is going to be packed, like it was for Game 1. And they got to use that energy to their advantage, because the Lynx literally sucked the energy out of the building. If you watch that run in the fourth quarter, it felt like there's no way this is happening, and then all of a sudden it happened, and the building got quiet. And you have to, if you're the Liberty, come out there and respond. But I think this is a group.
Think they will?
I think they will. I think this is a group that it wasn't their year last year. Everything stacked up perfectly for it to be, this is the year for their WNBA championship. They had a great regular season. They just need, I think they literally just need Brianna Stewart to play a little bit better and to shoot a little bit more efficiently. And I think that'll get them over the line. I think Minnesota are a great team with a lot of scoring options, whether it's Collier or whoever it is, but they're going to score the rock. It's just the Liberty need to be a little bit more efficient on the offensive side of the ball.
Surfer Guy, what's your quick take?
Well, real quick, I want to do a quick zoom on what you said there about how Stewart just needs to essentially get her act together. I foresee that coming very soon. I don't see this being a long standing issue. Honestly, I have quite good faith in the Liberty for tomorrow's game. So, however, I do think it is going to come down to her being one of the veterans on the team and having an inner locker room presence that we've seen in post and pregame interviews from both the regular and postseason. So I think that's ultimately what it's going to come down to, the inner team leadership from not just from the coach's perspective. So seeing what those veteran players can make happen. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the Liberty are going to take this one, and they're going to show that they're still the same team that they've been all season long. But I could be wrong, and that is the exciting twist of this series. It's turned into an interesting one. New York Liberty, Minnesota Lynx, tomorrow at Barclays, 3 p.m., Sunday matinee in Brooklyn, and you've been listening to One on One. We're going to be right back. We're going to talk some college football and get right into some great matchups there. But thank you for listening so far. It's been a great show. We've still got an hour left. This is One on One with WFUV Sports. We'll be right back.
You're listening to WFUV, New York.
Welcome back to One-on-One on WFUV Sports. It's been a great show so far. Still some show left in this final hour. It's been a pleasure being on with you guys, Nick and Frank, and we're just going to get right into some college football, some exciting matchups today and this weekend. You look at Stanford at Notre Dame, and then you've got Ohio State versus Oregon, and you've got Texas versus Oklahoma, LSU versus Ole Miss. A ton of really star-studded matchups, highlights of the regular season. So I don't know which one you guys want to get into first. If you want to talk Stanford, Notre Dame,
I think Ohio State, Oregon is where we go.
Ohio, yeah, I think
I
think you're right.
I think that's a huge game.
Yeah.
And you know, it's a game that is now a conference game because of all this realignment that we've seen. So it's going to be the first ever Big Ten matchup between Ohio State and Oregon, and it's at Oregon. And I think it's before this season when you looked at like these possible matchups, my first thought was like, okay, this is stupid. Like Oregon being in the Big Ten and getting a chance to play Ohio State in a conference game. But now that it's here and it's number 2 versus number 3. This is the potential to be a really great game. Ohio State, you know, you look at their offense, and I think contrary to previous years, this year's Ohio State offense is super run heavy. I mean, they've got such a great duo between Henderson and then Quinshon Judkins too. So they combined for 805 yards on the ground, 9 rushing touchdowns. How can Oregon stop this Ohio State running game? I think Ohio State, their offensive line also previously has been a weakness in prior seasons, but this year it's been so strong, and they've done such a great job running the football. It's going to be tough, and I think, you know, Ohio State open up as 3-point favorites here, but both teams 5-0. Oregon, a little bit of an uneven start to start the season, but they've sort of righted the ship. They haven't lost any games, but, you know, early on playing close game against Idaho, 24-14, a win at home, where that's a game where you feel like Oregon should be blowing the doors off them. But they're heading into this game at 5-0. They're hosting Ohio State, one of the biggest games they've hosted in a very long time. And it's just overall a great slate of games today.
How do you think, focusing on that game, how do you think Will Howard does tonight?
It's interesting. I think when you look at this Ohio State team and you look at this Oregon team, like he doesn't have to do as much like Will Howard, the way this Ohio State offense is set up. It's not like the CJ Stroud Ohio State where they're like airing the ball out pretty much every play, you know, to whatever star receivers they have out there. It's been so much more run heavy, and it's worked for them. They've had one of the best rushing attacks, the two-headed rushing attack between Judkins and Henderson. I don't think he necessarily has to have that solid of a game if they just keep pounding the ball, you know, down the throat of Oregon. And the other big reason why Will Howard and this Ohio State offense have been so successful is red zone efficiency. Like 21 times this season they've been in the red zone. They've scored points on all 21, touchdowns on 20 of the 21. So that's like next level red zone efficiency. So even if Will Howard isn't like airing the ball out and making really spectacular throws or spectacular plays, I don't think he necessarily needs to for them to be successful in this game.
Not the slightest. And honestly, in a complete hypothetical world, let's say the Ducks have just had it made in the shade on defense. There are no passes able to be made. Line can't make a run. I still think Ohio State will have a chance. Their defense has been, while underregarded, certainly perfectly performative. Tyleik Williams and Michael Hall Jr. with a combined tackle of 22 each. This line, for starters, has been able to apply pressure both on the run and on the pass front. I haven't really seen any glaring chinks in the armor of the Ohio State defense. So when it comes to a quarterback like Bo Nix, who has tons of experience in this sort of realm, it's gonna be really interesting to see how the pass rush and coverage are played out. But case in point, the Ohio State defense will certainly be able to hold the line against those Ducks.
I think Oregon is going to win this. I not just to be contrarian, but Dylan Gabriel has been sensational this season. He is he's thrown for almost 1,500 yards. So right now it's 1,449, 11 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. He's thrown 2 or more touchdown passes in every game this season, and he's recorded a rushing touchdown in 3 of his past 4 contests. And then the Ducks also have weapons on the outside. They've got Tez Johnson. He's hauled in 43 receptions for 395 yards and 5 touchdowns. Is averaging around 9.2 yards per catch. And then Jordan James, also very effective. He's got 552 yards and 5 touchdowns on 88 carries. I think Oregon is going to – they're just going to surprise people today. But not too much of a surprise because I still think this is a pretty even matchup, all things considered.
I mean, it's number 2 against number 3. It doesn't get much closer than I think the betting odds kind of reflect just how close this is. And with Dylan Gabriel, he's so experienced. I mean, this is his 5th, 6th year of college, 3rd different school, but he's been around for a while now. And I think it was a little bit of an uneven start. You think about that Idaho game where Oregon realistically should be kind of blowing them away. And then Boise State, they play close in the next game too. Both those games at home. But you get through those, and then you get a win versus Oregon State, then UCLA and Michigan State, and now you're 5-0. So maybe the performances haven't quite been to the level of Ohio State. Ohio State defensively have allowed basically nothing at all this season. I mean, they've had shutouts, they've held teams to 7 points, but really, it's been really hard to score on this offense. So I think, although this Oregon team has been sort of lighting up the score sheet from an offensive perspective, through Dylan Gabriel and through all those offensive weapons, scoring pretty much 30-plus points a game in every game, they've not faced a defense like this Ohio State defense yet. And I think I like the idea of Ohio State just really committing to the run again and using using those 2 backs and putting pressure on this Oregon defense and just see how they respond. If Oregon can figure out a way to stop the run and force Will Howard to throw the ball, then that's where I think where things get really, really interesting. But really no one's been able to stop this Ohio State running attack so far this season. And for both these teams, it's the biggest test they faced yet so far. But I think it's just a really, really interesting matchup and a highlight of this new era of college football where you get a matchup like Oregon-Ohio State, 2 of the best teams in the nation in a conference setting.
So you think Ohio State going to win narrowly?
I'm going to take Ohio State in maybe a 3-4 point win.
Frank?
So obviously a tricky guess, 2 and 3, definitely hard to predict. However, I am also going to have to give it to the narrow win for the Buckeyes. I think if they continue to play ground and pound football, stick to their guns. Judkins is already on par for, getting close to 500 rushing yards here. So I think he'll be looking to hit that milestone tomorrow, I reckon. And so case in point, I'll have him by just a hair, the Buckeyes.
I got Oregon by a hair, but we'll see which hair wins out. And let's take things down south, guys. There's a pretty massive game in the SEC title race. It's going to take place center stage in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Number 9 Ole Miss is visiting number 13 LSU. renewal of a long-running rivalry. It's going to be the 113th meeting all time between the two foes, and right now LSU has a 65-42 advantage in the series. And it also features two of the SEC's most established coaches, Brian Kelly for LSU and Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin. So I think this is definitely an exciting matchup between two high-powered offenses. And to me, it's a question of who's going to blink first on defense. What do you guys say?
And you talk about rivalries. I mean, there's also the Texas-Oklahoma, too, which I think we'll get into a little bit later. But a great week for rivalries in college football. But LSU, think about just how poorly they started the season with that loss to USC and the comments afterwards from Brian Kelly kind of making headlines in the media. They shouldn't have lost that game. It was a very bad loss for them. But for Ole Miss, their only loss coming against Kentucky, it's really going to be an interesting matchup with Ole Miss just slightly favored. But I've been really impressed by what Jackson Dart has done this season at quarterback for Ole Miss, already over 2,000 yards passing. The touchdown-interception ratio is a lead at 13-2. He's been really, really good. But, again, it's like early season college football is one thing, but then once you start getting into these juicy conference matchups, whether it's Ohio State, Oregon, whether it's Ole Miss, LSU, you can have all your narratives about what you've done to be successful early on in the season, but facing a team like LSU at Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge, it's a tough environment to go to. And I think when you mention about who's going to blink first defensively, I think that is a really big part of it. But in terms of just a mouth-watering matchup in the SEC, in the Deep South, at LSU, I think it's going to be a really, really tough game for Ole Miss, even though they're favored. I think going into Tiger Stadium is not an easy thing to do. And LSU really have righted the ship after that opening loss to USC, which should not have happened, really, in terms of the way they blew that game towards the end, losing on that last-second touchdown. But I think if I had to pick, I think I'd probably take LSU to win just slightly because of the home field advantage.
Frank?
I think when you're dealing with a team like LSU, Nick, the home field advantage is something that definitely needs to be factored in. When you get those high-caliber, high student population teams, to name a couple, you have your Notre Dames and hometown of Madison, obviously. But I do say that I'm going to have to side with Ole Miss on this one. I think LSU, while certainly proving and displaying their confidence to their coach Brian Kelly, I mean, he also keeps it very run-of-the-mill, keeps it very simple. Last year when LSU played Ole Miss, they pretty much left enormous pillows of space along, not only in the run gaps, the A and B, but also in the backfield. So, I mean, Coach Brian obviously acknowledging these failures. A quote from him saying, "They do such a great job of having the answers for virtually everything you do. So we've got to mix it up," he says. So without a shadow of a doubt, we're going to be seeing some interesting, maybe some new cards in the deck for the LSU team. However, it should be, regardless, it should be an interesting matchup. Both teams displaying a lot of firepower on both ends of the field. So we'll see what Lane Kiffin and Brian Kelly have to say when they go head to head. We'll have to see.
Look, I think LSU has been great at home, and it's a tough environment for Ole Miss. But I think this game is just going to come down to, you talk about who's going to blink first, also going to come down to which team is going to have the ball last. I think Ole Miss has been the higher performing team statistically, and I think they're going to show that. I think Ole Miss is going to win in a close one down in Baton Rouge. But we don't have that much time left in the segment, so I want to quickly go to Texas, Oklahoma. Nick, take it away. What do you think?
So Quinn Ewers is back for Texas, which is big after Arch Manning had to start in the last two games. Obviously not that big of having Arch Manning as the backup is it's a luxury for number one Texas. But Red River rivalry, these teams have played each other every year since 1929. They played for the first time in 1900, and I saw a clip of Baker Mayfield talking about during his Oklahoma days about this rivalry, just how much it means, and just emphasizing just how much they hate Texas. And it goes both ways. So Texas are huge favorites, obviously, as the number 1 team in the nation, favored by double-digit points. And for Oklahoma, there's some quarterback controversy. Jackson Arnold's been benched, so it's been Malik Hawkins. He started the last game in a comeback win against Auburn. But both teams coming off a bye week. Despite the rivalry, despite Oklahoma being at home, I think I see Texas blowing them away. This is a really good Texas team that's talented in pretty much every facet of the game. They've been waiting for the Horns to be up for a very long time, and this year I think they finally are, and I see Texas winning big.
That's certainly a possibility. I definitely recognize the existence of that. I mean, like you said, Texans, the number 1 team in the nation, averaging a cool, calm and collected 45 points a game. So, I mean, certainly they've put all chips on their scoring. Arch Manning obviously bringing a heap of all sorts of hype from the mile-long highlight reel he displayed from his high school era. So, it's been certainly a lot of fun to finally watch him come into his own out there. But I think this is going to be a real test of his mettle against the Sooners to see just what he's made of against a real team, and especially like you said, I mean, this is the Cotton Bowl. This is this is going to be a big one. So we'll see who comes out on the other side of the Red River. But as it stands right now, I think I've got your back, Nick. I think the Texans will have it, but one way to find out.
And I think it is going to be Quinn Ewers starting at quarterback for Texas, but I don't think it matters. Like the fact that they have 2 quarterbacks of that caliber. Yeah. So like if Ewers gets injured, which he is a little. There's been talk if he's injury prone or how you want to label it, but he missed 2 games and Arch Manning stepped in, and it wasn't noticeable any sort of decline in the offensive production. So they have that luxury there if things don't go well.
Just to fill you guys in real quick before you send it to break, when I opened my laptop, it was 14-7 Alabama over South Carolina right now, nearing the end of the second quarter. But then before I could even turn on the mic to talk to you guys, South Carolina drew a safety on Alabama.
Yeah,
so it is now 14-9 with a minute to go, and it's 1st and 10 at the Alabama 44 for Alabama, it appears.
Wow.
Right on.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for the update, Jack. And just one last thing, Notre Dame versus Stanford. Don't quite have time for a deep analysis, but quick score or win prediction.
Notre Dame by 1 million.
Notre Dame by 1 million.
By 1 million. I think they're both, it should be an interesting, matchup, but I think Notre Dame by 1 or 2 scores, just 1 or 2.
All right. Well, we've got some exciting games in store in the college football world for today, but that'll wrap up our college football segment. And when we come back, 1969 World Series champion and former Met and former Yankee Ron Swoboda will be calling in. Very exciting. So stay here with us. We'll be right back. You're listening to One on One on WFUV Sports.
What's going on, everyone? I'm Jack Warner, one of your WFUV beat reporters for the 2024 New York Mets. Baseball is in the air in Queens, and I'll have you covered all season long as Carlos Mendoza looks to lead the Amazons to a World Series title in his first season as New York's manager. To stay in the loop on every Severino Bump Day or Lindor Big Fly, follow me on Twitter at Jack_Warner23. I'll have you covered with live in-game updates, exclusive media availability, and post-game recaps about your boys in blue and orange. WFUV is your home for New York sports.
Welcome back to One-on-One on WFUV Sports, New York's longest-running sports call-in show, and it is a total honor to have a member of the 1969 Miracle Mets team calling in. I'm a Mets fan. We've got two WFUV Mets beat reporters who are working the show today. We've got Ron Swoboda calling in. Mr. Swoboda, thank you so much for taking the time to come on today.
Hey, man, given that our boys are in the hunt, I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. And first question I want to ask you, Mr. Swoboda, is how do you feel about the Mets' run this year? Do you think that a Subway Series is possible? Do you think it's in the mix? You played for both teams.
Yeah, I think I think the toughest match is going to be getting out of the National League because I thought either San Diego or now the Dodgers, of course, are nasty, and you're going to get all you need from LA, and so the Mets have some work in front of them before we get giddy about a potential Subway Series.
Ron, Nick Guzman here. I'm just curious how it's been for you watching this run, like just as a fan, somebody who used to be on the team, just watching this run.
Dude, I get
it's been amazing, right?
MLB extra innings for one reason: the New York Mets, and early in the season when they couldn't hit themselves in the butt with both hands and a flashlight, I found them almost unwatchable. And then they got into June, man, and things started coming together. And Carlos Mendoza, without a lot of drama, I think has a pretty darn good feel for what's happening in game, and I really respect what he has done and what the guys have done to pull it together and turn themselves into something. Because from June on, they're one of the best teams in baseball, so they don't have to apologize to anybody. They don't have to apologize to Jeter and A-Rod for picking Philly in their segment of the National League, and they don't have to apologize for anything they've done. I'm really happy with how it's rolling.
Mr. Swoboda, this is Frank Spicuzza. Earlier on in our broadcast, it was brought about that the Mets have seemed to have had a lot more fun this season than the Yankees. As a former player for both teams, how do you feel about that statement, being that the Mets have had this sort of fairy tale, magic, and general fun vibe to their season this year?
Boy, I think I think the chemistry is what you're talking about. And when you talk about the number of guys and the kind of money they make and how everybody can be, so much into themselves and all of these things that do not exactly inure in the benefit, in the direction of good chemistry and having good fun. But the Mets figured it out, and I think Mendoza's a part of that. He's got a handle on things. I think he figured out how to relate to guys and make them understand that, you guys are all wealthy. You're all going to have a lot of money coming your way. And let's just have fun playing this game that we're pretty darn good at. And, boy, it seemed to happen, and they pick one another up, and through the playoffs, those big hits. Alonso, one of my favorite guys, it takes a pretty good reliever, Williams, for the Brew Crew, deep to right field on his signature changeup. It's like, well, now, somebody knew what he was throwing, maybe.
Mr. Swoboda, when you wrote your memoir that was released back in 2019 and talking about that Miracle Mets 69 team, did those memories still feel as fresh as they did when they happened? Or, as time has gone on, have some of those memories faded?
It depends on what kind of, if I'm around the guys, and we're running out of guys. I just went to Ed Kranepool, my roommate and friend for 60 years, passed away. And so we're getting short on members in that particular club. But, yeah, when you're when you're around Art Shamsky and those guys, and I'll be talking to somebody, and we start dredging up memories. Those are the ones that you hang on to, because nothing like that ever happened to me in baseball. It happened that one year, and those things don't erase.
And Ron, with these Mets this season, it seems like every time they need a big hit, they get a big hit. Whether it's Lindor, Alonso, Vientos, someone seems to be stepping up and getting that hit. I'm curious.
Lindor's been amazing.
He's been so good.
Lindor's MVP season, but yeah, I mean, just coming through the playoffs when Marte, needed to get a knock, and he bangs in a couple of runs when they needed to score some runs. Alonso, who was struggling, hadn't been showing much power. All of a sudden in the playoffs, he's got 3 bombs now, and they and they all mattered. Early in the season, you felt like when he hit them, they didn't matter.
Exactly, yeah.
He was hitting them in the parts of games when guys are just throwing you, just trying to make you put it in play, So, I mean, you go right down the lineup. Vientos has been a star in the playoffs, and he's a kid. He's a young guy, and I'm just. I'm loving what I'm seeing. That's all.
I'm curious how you see the Mets matching up with the Dodgers. They're the 1 seed in the NL. They had the best record in baseball this year. There was all the hype coming into the offseason for LA, but there's been some injuries. Things haven't been quite as even. But at the end of the day, with all the money and everything, it's both teams are in the NLCS. So how do you see the Mets matching up with LA?
I felt like, look, if you watch the Dodgers roll over on San Diego, you saw some pretty good pitching, and I mean, it's big time pitching, and they keep the old conundrum, it's good pitching beats good hitting. Well, LA can come get you with some pretty good arms out of the pen. Back to back, they just starting, they're going to give the New York Mets all they need, and that's going to be I think that's going to be an iconic series. Whoever comes out of that alive, and I'm looking for the Mets, obviously, but that doesn't have to happen. They're going to have to play them and play hard and do it right.
Absolutely. Mr. Swoboda, staying on focus of the pitching and moreover the defense, many people bring up your famed catch in the 1969 series against Baltimore. I'm sure I don't have to remind you. Have there been any comparable plays or moments in the Mets playoff run so far that you would compare to that level of clutch, if you will?
I just think, you play 9 innings against, when you get, let's just put it in the playoff context. You get in there against good teams, the best teams, and the ball's going to be in play, and you're going to have to make plays. And a lot of times, the simplest plays. Look at the 2 plays that Vientos botched at third base when he really had plays at home, but a guy hits that little hippity hop towards third base, and you got to quick hand it, and make a good throw, and he's dropped a couple. When they hit the harder stuff to him, he just vacuums them up, and it just, it's not always the magnificent looking plays that are the hard plays. Sometimes the easiest ones, because you don't take a lot of ground balls like that, and you don't see a lot of ground balls like that. But you get a guy going down the first base line and a third baseman thinking, man, I got to speed it up a little. That's when you make big mistakes, and they can't. They're not going to be able to do that a whole lot against the Dodgers, I don't think.
Mr. Swoboda, this is a little off topic, but I was speaking to my father last night, and my dad is a huge Mets fan, and I mentioned that you were coming on the show and speaking to us, and he told me something I had no idea he had never told me before, is that my dad's dad, my grandfather, knew you personally, Joel Oppenheimer. He said that I am.
I just used Joel Oppenheimer's name. Joel Oppenheimer was one of my great friends. I just told you I just came off the golf course. If I don't say this at least one time every round of golf I play, something's wrong with me. I forgot. I have an expression. When you hit a ball, it's not the best shot you ever hit. It's not terrible. It's okay. My expression is, as the Jewish poet would say, it could be verse. And I said that today, and I told a guy I was playing with about Joel Oppenheimer, who was a great friend of mine, who was a Jewish poet from New York City, and I met him as a young player when he was, when he was a long-haired hippie poet, and I didn't know what to make of him, but I knew one thing: Joel Oppenheimer was a great baseball fan and a great Mets fan, and wrote some beautiful stuff about how he related to the New York Mets. The Wrong Season is a book I remember of
Yes.
his that was that's in my possession and will never leave it.
Yes, absolutely. And my dad also mentioned that you attended when Joel, my grandfather, when he passed away in 1988, you attended his memorial service, and you spoke at the memorial service, and my dad says that he'll always appreciate that.
Well, I mean, we were close friends, and I was up in Henniker, New Hampshire. I went up and visited him up there when he was at New England College. Joe wasn't just a casual acquaintance. He became a really close friend in our family, and the first scholar that I knew, the first guy I knew that could do the New York Times crossword on Sunday with a pen. And my wife is a big puzzler, and she does the crossword puzzles every day from the New York Times. And when I sit down every once in a while and try to help her out, she doesn't need a whole lot of my help. But Joel was was a puzzler and of some repute for sure.
Yes, and I just want to circle it back to baseball. You've seen a lot of changes in the game. How do you think the game has evolved? Do you think it's evolved for the better with some of the changes they've made to the rules over the past few years, even few decades?
Yeah, us old school guys, sometimes we can get locked in place and don't want to tamper with a game that we thought was pretty well laid out when we played it. But you saw what was happening to the audiences of baseball. You saw how long games were starting to take, and I think speeding up the hitter, putting the hitter and the pitcher on a clock has doesn't help everybody. Some of these older pitchers don't like that pace, but tough cookie. They needed to speed the game up. They needed to move the fielders, two on each side of the diamond on the infield. I think they needed to do a couple of those things, and I think they have helped the pace of baseball. And look, when I watch a game and every guy that gets a base hit's got to do some kind of little act down at first base, some kind of hand signal, some kind of something or other, or when you hit a home run, they got all kinds of crap going on in the dugout. That interests me not. I don't find it amusing. I played in a time where you act like you did it before, and it's but today's guys, they determine what the culture of the game is. The culture was different back when I played, but good grief, that was a long time ago, and the game needs to evolve into today's society. And if they want to do all this, voguing and stuff, well, let them, they're the best players in the world, and you'll see in the playoffs, things that will stay in your memory forever, and the rest of that extraneous stuff, I let go. But it's up to the players to decide what the culture is. So I don't have any I don't have any real quibble in them. I just have a hard time relating to all that.
You also have lots of experience as a broadcaster. I mean, you've worked for WCBS as a color commentator for the Marlins AAA affiliate, the New Orleans Baby Cakes, among many other things. I'm curious, just as all of us here are aspiring broadcasters, what drew you into the business?
Say that again?
What drew you into the broadcast business?
A paycheck. Well, I did a job when I was finished with baseball, and I had only a little bit of college and no real skill at anything else. And WCBS offered me a job, and I thought that was the most amazing thing in the world. And the crazy thing is, I ended up and in local television sports, in the news context for 20 years. So they gave me a chance to establish a new career when baseball was over, and I was just turning 30 years old. So, I felt very, very fortunate for that to happen at WCBS and the people there that welcomed me and gave me a shot at it. And I didn't belong in that building doing anything else but carrying a mop and a bucket when I walked through the front door the first time. But you hang around, you work at it, you get some opportunities, you fail, you get up, and you keep working at it. And I ended up putting 20 years in local television sports, and now I'm last couple of years I've been doing color on ESPN Plus for the Tulane Green Wave college baseball team, and having as much fun as I could imagine in my 80s.
Right on. It sounds like fortitude and perseverance have been some hallmarks of your career. Taking one last look at the past, however, if you could take one aspect of those hardworking and perseverant 1969 Mets and give it, implant into the hearts and minds of the 2024 Mets of today, what would it be? Would it be a fortitude or a sort of willingness to win or learn, anything like that?
Look, I tell you what, we were blessed with a bunch of young arms, Seaver and Guzman and Jamie McAndrew and Tug McGraw, and I'm just talking of the young guys. Nolan Ryan was on that team. Only World Series he ever played in his, almost more than 25 years in Major League Baseball. We were very, very fortunate. We had some veteran guys as well, Ron Taylor and other guys that did well. We had good pitching, and we got Don Clendenin in June at the trade deadline, and all of a sudden we were a little bit better offensive team, and he helped with that. Cleon Jones almost won the batting title that year. Tommy Agee was a great player for us and played great center field, and me and our Chansky platoon, once we got rolling into August, it was Shamsky and me holding down right field. So we, Hodges, somebody asked Gil Hodges, our manager, do you believe in platoon? And he said, for this team, I do. And he had a great feel for it. And in this age of sabermetrics and all of the, statistical analyses and whatnot, Gil Hodges had sabermetrics in his brain. He never got behind a game, knew exactly what he wanted to do. So we were well managed, and we could pitch with anybody, and we made those runs count a whole lot more. The team the next year scored more runs than we did in 1969, but our pitching wasn't as good, and we faltered down the stretch against the Pirates. So it's pitching that gets you there.
Mr. Swoboda, I have one last question. My co-host Frank mentioned your obviously well-known catch earlier, but you were called Rocky during your early days with the Mets because of what other people perceived as your quote-unquote less than reliable fielding. When you made that incredible catch in the World Series, did you feel like you proved the doubters wrong?
Well, you know what? I worked hard at making myself a better outfielder because I made some rather conspicuous errors along the way. Rocky was because they thought I was a little thick in the cranium, a little hard to get a good idea through the the bone structure in my head. And I think that's where that came from. But I worked at being a better outfielder, and to be able to make a play in the '69 World Series Game 4 that saved the game, kept us alive, and in a game that we eventually came back and won. I felt like I don't care what conventional wisdom thought about me as a fielder. I knew what I had managed to do, and people were welcome to their own take on it. And like I've always said about conventional wisdom, it's conventional, but it's rarely wisdom. So I felt like I worked at it, and that play I made was the result of Eddie, our third base coach, hit me thousands of balls with a fungo bat, and made me a better fielder as a result.
Mr. Swoboda, I want to thank you so much for coming on and speaking to us today. We really, really appreciate it, and I learned something new today and yesterday, learning about my grandfather's relationship with you, which is amazing. And once again, thank you so much. This is Ben Oppenheimer, along with my co-hosts Nick Guzman and Frank Spicuzza. Thank you, Mr. Swoboda, for coming on today.
It was my pleasure. You guys take care, and let's enjoy the playoffs. Go Mets. Which Oppenheimer is
Let's
dead?
go Mets.
LGM.
Okay, well, that was just the Ron Swoboda interview, and it was definitely penetrating. Learned a lot about what he thought about the game now, and his thoughts on how it's evolved, as well as his time with the '69 Mets. And for our final few minutes, we don't have much time really at all.
Let's just chop it up.
But let's talk about Rangers, Islanders, and Devils.
I don't think we can get to all three of them.
All right, so we got to choose. We got to choose.
When there's a will, there's a way. We'll figure it out. All right.
I believe.
Jack Hughes on the Devils. Cool. Yeah.
Super attractive.
Very handsome man. Anthony Duclair is
Well, since you're the Rangers, why don't you give us just your Rangers rundown? Okay, so
they looked very, very good and very, very fast in their season opener against the Pittsburgh Penguins. There's obviously a ton of different stories in the air right now between players that are a little banged up, a little injured.
Contract situations.
And then as well as the elephant in the room, Igor Shesterkin. We're getting a call. Hold on one second.
Phone call.
Back to you guys.
But, yeah, so the Rangers, they're trying to re-sign Igor Shesterkin, their star goaltender. But he recently declined an 8-year, $88 million contract offer. He knows he has this team by the scruff of their neck. Like, Igor is so essential to what the Rangers are trying to do. It's a team that's built, 5-on-5 metrics aren't great, but power play, penalty kill are pretty elite. And then you put Igor in net, and that takes you to the next level. So he knows he can get as much money out of the Rangers as they want, because the way the team is built, they need him. And I think him declining the contract, or this first contract offer, is exemplifies that.
Boys, I got locked into the board. I have Nick Palmer, who's probably going to say some things about the New York Islanders. But before we get to that, I do want to say there were so many, and I'll say it really quickly, there's so many opinions about the Igor contract thing. All I'm going to say, to put it very simply, is he's going to get that or more at the end of the season.
He's the best goaltender in hockey.
No matter how he plays, even if this season is a step down, he's going to get around that. I see no problem in a player trying to bet on himself. Anyway, Nick Palmer.
Islanders time. What's up, Nick?
Hey guys, how's it going? So I've been told I need to give a little Islanders update. So here's what I want to do. They lost in an overtime heartbreaker to Utah Hockey Club in their first game, but it's fine.
Is Utah supposed to be good, Nick?
What, Ben?
I'm saying, is Utah supposed to be good?
Yeah, Utah's going to be fine. They got Mikhail Sergachev, and Clayton Keller's developing really well. But look, a lot of the problems were the penalty kill. But, the high forward could be caught getting too aggressive. I think that's what happened a lot in the Utah game. But it's literally one game. So, like, chill out. They're going to be fine. I know they led the league in overtime losses last year. I don't think they're going to do that again. The other point of talking is, of course, Ilya Sorokin, who's yet to play. It's that Lou Lamoriello's just not letting him. He's still coming back from back surgery. Alex Romanov says he's like a dog in a cage. He wants to get out there. He's working out twice a day. He's absolutely foaming at the mouth. And lastly, Maxim Soplakov played really well. He's the first Islanders player to score in his NHL debut since Atu Ratu in 2022, and also the first to play more than 20 minutes in his NHL debut. So there's the Islanders breakdown, guys. They're 0-0-1, and should be a good year with Duclair, Barzell, and Horvat at the helm.
So, Nick, if you're still on, what's your prediction for the Metro? What place are they coming in? The Isles?
I have them right now at wild card 1.
Okay.
The Metropolitan's a good division. I'm under no illusions there.
All right.
And it always is. I think it leaves us about a minute for a little Devils roundup.
Yeah. Is it even worth it? It's Jersey.
Okay. So, New Jersey, their problem for the last, even when they made the playoffs 2 years ago and beat the Rangers in the first round in 7 games, they made the second round. The problem was the goaltending. It was always the goaltending last year. Before that, they got a goaltender now in Jacob Markstrom from the Calgary Flames. So a lot of people think that's going to be what puts them over the top. Jack Hughes was not fully healthy last season. Is he going to be fully healthy this year? That's a big talking point. Luke Hughes is out with an injury right now. Brett Pesce, their other big free agent acquisition from the defensive perspective, also out with an injury. But they've gotten deeper in terms of third and fourth line play. Paul Cotter, Stefan Nason have joined the fray. Former Devil Stefan Nason then went elsewhere and now back in New Jersey. I think it's a Devils team that's built better than they were last year. The whole Michael McLeod situation didn't help last season. He was a very big part of the Devils' third and fourth lines, and him having to leave unexpectedly during the season definitely hurt the team. And now it's a matter of, okay, you have a goaltender, you have Jack Hughes and hopefully healthy. You have these other pieces like Nico Hischier and Jesper Bratt. Can the Devils bounce back from what was an incredibly disappointing season last year? So disappointing. You were expecting them to take another step in the right direction. They just didn't. They've made the moves in the offseason to make it happen. Now it's about health, and I think it's about whether or not Jacob Markstrom is going to be that guy in goal.
Well, that just about
That'll do it.
Wrap things up for today's show. Today's show, you saw a lot of moments where it was 3-on-1, 4-on-1, people of average intelligence trying to attack a man with extraordinary intelligence.
That's the brick wall for
And that's right. And so I'd like to thank everyone for listening today. You've been listening to One-on-One on WFUV Sports. Our radio producer is Jack Warner. Our video producer, Lydia Perner. My co-hosts, Nick Guzman, Frank Spicuzza. Great first debut, by the way. That was great. Great show today. Everyone, hope you have a good weekend. A lot of great sports in store. You've been listening to One-on-One on WFUV Sports. Our executive producer, can't forget about him, Bobby Chaffardini. Shout out to Bobby C. Thank you all for listening. That's One-on-One on WFUV Sports.